Hello, welcome to or back to the channel. My name is Brittany. If you are new here, we are diving into a deep dive today, you guys. Recently, I watched a testimony from a woman who went from New Age spirituality to finding Jesus. Now, this is something that I've been seeing a lot of. There's a lot of people who completely denounce New Age spirituality who were once deep in that world. And all of a sudden, they're coming out and saying, I found Jesus, Jesus saved me. And it's something that I find quite interesting. This is no judgment to anybody at all, but I feel that there's a lot of nuance with this. I've had this curiosity for a while, and this woman's video was sent to me, and it's interesting because I actually know her. I don't know her personally or anything like that, but we recently connected online just a couple of months ago. This is no judgment toward her or anything like that. Nothing against her personally at all. I will be using her testimony though, because her story is a clear example of a much bigger conversation. And I think it's important to have these conversations. You know, I feel like the world has this black and white way of thinking. It's like, this is the truth. No, this is the truth. It's very black and white. And I'm here to dabble in the gray. Let's get into the gray area, because I personally don't think anything is so black and white. So I'm here to talk about it today. First of all, if I'm looking off to the side here is because I have my notes. Okay. There's a lot of notes that I took. I want to make sure I'm staying on track. I'm also going to be showing you clips on screen, and I'm going to be viewing them here to the side as well. So if you see me moving my eyes over to the side, that's why I'm just making sure that I'm staying on track with things, because I could go on a tangent. But with that said, I first want to honor her courage and her vulnerability in sharing her story, because I do feel like that's not easy to do. So I want to honor that first and foremost. And I'm not trying to invalidate her or her experience at all. This video is about expanding the conversation around embodiment and discernment. And I think it's an important conversation to be had. So I'm going to be using clips from her YouTube video here and using her video as somewhat as a framework. And I want to be clear, her story is hers, okay? We have not walked in her shoes. There's no way for us to really understand fully what she went through, because we haven't walked in her shoes. So I want to acknowledge that first and foremost. The same way nobody can ever fully understand your path, right? The same way nobody would ever fully understand my path, because we are all on our own unique paths, and we are the only ones that see things through our own lens, right? So I just want to acknowledge that as well. And at the same time though, the pattern that she's describing, right? This jump from New Age to Jesus is not unique to her, okay? This exact movement is quite common. And again, I'm using her testimony as a framework, but I feel like a lot of what she shares in her testimony, it's a similar pattern that I see with other people who go from New Age to spirituality. Now, before we dive too deep in, I also wanted to mention that I myself have a relationship with Jesus, okay? I know some of you might be like, what do you mean, Brittany? But you read tarot cards, like you're in the New Age, Brittany. How do you have a relationship with Jesus? So personally, I don't like being associated with the New Age community myself. Again, nothing against people in the New Age community. It's the same way I don't like being associated to religion. To me, New Age is its own religion. And personally, for me, spirituality really has been my own thing. So for me, yes, I have tarot cards, but guess what? I keep a rosary next to my tarot card deck. I've been cultivating a relationship with Jesus myself over the last couple of years. I've been genuinely curious about Jesus and why so many people really believe that he is the way, he is the only way. You know, I even have my little cross necklace here. I have a couple cross necklaces, but I'm wearing this little one today. And I asked Jesus, you know, of the highest truth and compassion to be with me for this video. I also asked my guides and my angels to really help me speak through the heart space with this. I'm not judging anybody who's deep in New Age, also not judging anyone deep in religion or following Jesus either. I'm just here to expand the conversation because it is interesting, and I think that there is a lot of nuance. So I just wanted to give you a little backstory about me. I have been cultivating my own relationship with Jesus for a while. I actually grew up very religious, very Catholic, and I needed to pull away from that. And then over the last few years, I've been developing my relationship with Jesus specifically, but from a non-religious lens, just with genuine and open curiosity. So I do want to say that as well. And of course, I do dabble in the New Age, right? Like I see truth in New Age, just the same way I see truth in religion, right? But I also see a lot of distortion in New Age, and I also see a lot of distortion in religion. So yeah, and I just think, as I said before, as society in general, we have such a black and white viewpoint, right? Such a black and white way of thinking, left versus right. It's either you're either right or you're wrong. It's either a yes or a no, etc. Right? And I'm here to speak to the nuance of that because I think it's important. So with that said, it's interesting. My sister sent me this video. She's like, Brittany, I'm basically curious on your perspective of this video. And I was like, no way. I actually recently connected with this girl online and she's really sweet. You know, I was supposed to go to Ireland. I was supposed to go to Scotland and Ireland, and I ended up not going there because my intuition led me. I ended up going to Italy instead, but she was so sweet and she gave me all of these recommendations, and I don't know her well, but it's just like such an interesting little connection. So I just want to speak to that as well. And I think that Ella, specifically, her name is Ella, I think she's a sweetheart. I think she has good intentions. I think her heart is in the right space. So I want to acknowledge all of those things. And again, I'm using her testimony as a framework, but a lot of what she talks about and speaks to, I see a lot of similar patterns with people that go from New Age to Jesus. And just in general, she brings up a lot of things that I want to speak to, that I really want to expand on. I invite you to go watch her testimony. Okay, it was almost 2.5 hours of a video, so it is long. I sat and I watched the whole thing with just an open heart, like genuine curiosity, because I was like, interesting, like I'm curious, right? Like I want to know. So I sat and I watched the whole thing, and I've broken it down. I've seen it now a few times because I, was breaking it down for this to make this video. But I do invite you to go watch her full testimony after this if you do feel interested, because of course I'm not going to be showing the whole thing, but I will be showing you quite a few clips from it just to speak to. So yeah, without further ado, this is going to be a long video. I just have a sneaky suspicion this is going to be a long one, you guys. So get cozy, get comfy, grab your coffee, grab your tea, grab your water, grab your snacks, and yeah, let's dive into the video. So first, I believe that it's important to mention, I believe that there's a light and dark to everything. Right? Here on this earth, we are here to experience the polarity. And personally, when it comes to New Age, I see a light and darkness to New Age. With Ella and her testimony, she really talks about it being all dark and it's demonic. A lot of people who move from New Age to Jesus talk about this, and they talk about all of these demons and all of these things that they didn't know that they were dealing with, and we're going to get more into that later. But personally, I do see the darkness in New Age too. I see it. I've been there. I've lived it. I see it. So I don't necessarily disagree with that. But again, we're going to get deeper into that later. But I don't think it's all dark, right? I think that there is a light and a dark side to anything. And her specifically, I do think that her journey is an example of the darkness of New Age. So I do want to affirm that because her story was very dark. So I do want to acknowledge that. I don't blame her for seeing it all as dark because that was her lived experience, right? She experienced a lot of the darkness within it. So I'm not trying to take away from that. But what I want to speak to is something fundamental about the human experience. And this is important to acknowledge. We are here to experience the polarity, up, down, expansion, contraction, in, out, light versus dark. Without the contrast, there is no experience. Without that contrast, right? We wouldn't have this human experience. In order to understand love, right? To fully understand love, we need to know what fear feels like. There is no light without the dark. Consciousness learns itself through opposites. That's how we learn here. And we chose to come down here. We chose as a soul, we chose to come down here. Now, I believe that our soul is love at the end of the day. That is the source of who we are, right? We are made in God's image. And to me, God is unconditional love, the highest frequency. That is who we are at the core. We come from that. That is our soul. But to learn here, we absolutely need the opposite of that to learn. That is what gives us that contrast. And we see this in our world with everything. Like I said, contraction versus expansion, up versus down, in versus out, light versus dark. That's how we grow. And we came here to expand our consciousness here on earth, right? That's why we came here. We came here for many reasons, but a part of it is to learn, to grow, to expand. And as humans, we have language, right? Like we've created a language to help the mind organize reality. Language is meant to simplify something that is actually very complex, right? We made language to try to understand these things, but I feel personally language can actually be quite limiting. We need it and it's important, but we sometimes attach, I feel like, to certain meanings and definitions and certain words, especially when it comes to these invisible, energetic, or existential forces, right? We rely on symbols, labels, and archetypes to understand. That's where the term God versus the devil came in, right? Like, that's not something tangible. It's not something you can see or touch, right? So we've created language so our mind can understand what that is. And sometimes, though, that language is actually limiting. But us as humans, because we like control, we like structure, we kind of attach, I think, a little bit too much on the meaning. But these words were never meant to fully define these things. They were meant to help the human mind understand it. So we need these words. But I just think that's important to note. I think often different religions, religion versus New Age, for example, they use different language, but they use different language to describe the same thing. I'm going to show you a reel that I came across just the other day on Instagram. Now, this is not me saying, yes, this is the exact translation of all these words, but I think this is a good example of what I'm trying to say.
Sin is wounding, is trauma imprint. God is divinity, is the universe. Holy Spirit is higher self, is quantum field. Angels is spirit guides, is highest frequency. Prayer is intention, is frequency alignment. Confession is inner reflection, is energetic release. Temptation is ego, is old programming. Repentance is healing, is alchemy. Salvation is remembering, is DNA activation. Redemption is awakening, is nervous system safety. Forgiveness is radical responsibility, is freedom frequency. Faith is trust, is quantum leap. Worship is divine connection, is high frequency. Scripture is sacred texts, is light codes. Sermon is soul download, is transmission. Fasting is detachment, is nervous system reset. Church is sacred circle, is expansive field. Believer is divine connection, is Christ consciousness.
Okay, so I'm not saying I agree with every single one of her translations, okay, but that's not the point. We often try to describe the same thing, or we're using our different language to describe really the same thing, and sometimes we get stuck in the arguing. For example, this one here, religion, she says Holy Spirit means higher self, means quantum field. People in New Age might be talking about the higher self, when those in religion are talking about the Holy Spirit, and they might argue, no, you're not supposed to call on your higher self, or people in religion might not believe in a higher self. It's the Holy Spirit, when really they're just using different language to describe the same thing. And we get too stuck, I think, on this language, which again is just something that's important to note. And again, I'm not saying I agree with all of her translations, but it doesn't matter. That's not the point of the video. But I do love that video because it really does speak to exactly what I'm trying to convey here. And as humans, the language that we grew up with, that we were raised with, right? Or whatever, the language that is most comfortable to us, that is the language that we're going to speak. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's simply the language that we're going to use because that's what makes us feel most comfortable. And I feel like when people argue around those sorts of things, right, it's like they're viewing it from the lens of their own ego based on what they know, what they were taught, what's comfortable to them, without seeing that sometimes another language could be trying to describe the same thing, but it just doesn't sound the same. And because it doesn't sound the same, it doesn't register. And I believe that God is going to communicate with you in the way that is most comfortable for you. God is going to use your language. God doesn't care about what language you speak. He just wants to have conversation with you. He wants to be in union with you. He wants you to feel his love. So he's going to communicate with you in your language. That would be like saying everybody has to speak English. The only way to reach God is by speaking English. That's the only way to speak to God because he doesn't communicate in the other languages, right? That's just silly, right? You don't have to understand all of the other languages on earth. But as long as you have a language for yourself, whatever language that may be, maybe it's sign language, right? It doesn't matter. God is going to communicate with you through your language. And you can have that same beautiful connection with God regardless of the language that you speak, because it's not about the language, it's about the connection. And with that said, there's a darkness to that too. With any language, you can use language to uplift somebody, but you can also use that same language to tear somebody down, right? So within language, you have the light to it and the dark to it. It's not the language itself, right? It's not the language itself that makes it good or evil. It's the person and how they choose to use that language and how well they understand that language. Because that's another thing, misinterpretation, right? With language, there can be a lot of things that are misinterpreted or misunderstood. It might be trying, right? Language might be trying to convey or communicate something, but the receiver listening to the language, if they don't fully understand, they can misconstrue the message. There can be miscommunication. The person listening can misunderstand the true meaning behind the message, and that the truth behind it then becomes distorted. So that's something else to keep in mind, right? If we want to talk about the language of New Age, the language of religion, the language of being a follower of Jesus, right? X, Y, and Z, it doesn't matter. Knowing that there is a light and dark to all of it, there can be miscommunications, there can be distortions within it, right? It depends on the receiver and how much they truly understand and how well they are actually able to listen. Watching people go from New Age to Jesus, what I often see and notice in Ella's testimony was having a bad experience in that one language. Just because your experience was dark, and yes, darkness exists everywhere, that's the polarity, it doesn't make the whole system dark or the whole language dark. Just because someone experiences the darkness there, right? If you even think about a country, right? You go traveling somewhere and let's say you get robbed. Ooh. You're going to say, I had an awful experience there. Don't go there. It's filled with awful people. But then somebody else goes to that same country and they have a beautiful experience there, right? It's perception, experience. You get the point. You get it. I think you get where I'm trying to go with this. With that said, that experience can be true and valid for that person. If they had a dark experience, right? In that language or in that country, it doesn't mean they're a liar. It doesn't mean what they're saying is not true, but it's simply not the whole picture. That's their truth and it's valid for them. But it doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be everybody else's experience. And I think that's important to speak to. And something that I want to speak to, you know how I was talking about we come down here to experience the contrast. We need the contrast, right? Our soul is love at the end of the day. So what's the opposite of love? Right? The opposite of love, fear. I like to talk about the ego. We're here and we're a soul that is love connected to our intuition within us. But do you know what else is within us? Is darkness is within us too. The ego. We need that. The ego is often demonized, right? It should not be demonized. We have the ego within us too, which to me is like the darkness within us, right? And it's nothing to be afraid of because it's a necessary part for this experience. Without that contrast, we would not learn here. Talking about God, I want to talk about God and the devil because I'm going to link that in. I personally don't see God and the devil as two of these separate entities that are outside of us. You know, I believe as within, so without. I think God is in everything. I think God is everywhere. Kind of like the light and dark in everything here on earth, right? God is in everything, but there's darkness potentially in everything too, right? Because we need that contrast. Here on earth is the contrast. This is why we're here to learn. The other side, though, I believe is love. And coming here is where the contrast is because we need it to have this experience. But to me, I don't see God and the devil as two separate entities or battling beings in the way that they're often depicted in religion, right? Or how they're portrayed in society. I think that as humans, we use the term God and the devil. Again, going back to that language, I think we use those terms as an attempt to describe polar forces, right? Dark, evil versus God, the light. To me, it's simply polar forces. It's the same force. It's two different sides of the same coin. God, right, became a word for creator, expansion, love, unity. The devil became a word for darkness, contraction, fear, ego, separation, shadow. But in truth, they're not separate sources, right? They're different expressions of the same source, two sides of the same coin, as I just said. For example, water. You're going to have boiling water and then you're going to have ice cold water. You're going to have a very different experience interacting with boiling water compared to ice cold water. They're just different, but they're the same. Does that make sense? It's two opposite ends of the same source. You get what I'm trying to say, okay? And that's how I see God and the devil. And here on earth, we need the contrast, we need the dark, we need the light. One is going to feel a lot better because that is closer to who we are because we are love at the end of the day. So what's going to feel a lot better is love, right, here on earth is the light, is going to feel a lot better, but it doesn't necessarily make the dark only evil. Again, I think that we like to use those words to try to make sense of this feeling that's not so good. But my point is light and dark are not enemies. They're in relationship with each other. Darkness is not the absence of God. Darkness is where gestation happens. Seeds grow in the darkness. Wombs are dark, which is beautiful, right? That's where life is created. Transformation often also happens in the unseen. Light and dark are not in oppositions. They're in relationship. Rejecting darkness and pushing it away doesn't free you, but understanding it will. And I feel like a lot of people are afraid of the dark. They don't want to acknowledge the dark within them. They don't want to acknowledge it. It's scary. So they want to reject it. They want to push it away. That won't set you free. And you don't escape the darkness by calling it evil. When you understand it, that is where freedom can begin. It's a journey to get there. Now, this is all important for the conversation we're going to have. I feel like I haven't even jumped into the testimony yet. This is going to be a long video again. And what I've noticed when a lot of people jump from New Age to Jesus, the framework often becomes very rigid. God and the devil are often seen as outside forces, these forces that are outside of us, instead of also being understood as reflections of the ego and love that also reside within us. I feel personally, I always like to say the ego is an extension of the devil, as the soul is an extension of God. Yes, you have evil and good, whatever it is, whatever language you want to use, outside of us as well, right? You see the good in the world, you see the dark in the world. Of course, that's also true. You see it outside of us, but it also resides within us. I believe the soul is an extension of God, as the ego is an extension of the devil, and that's why in cartoons you often see depicted the angel and the devil on the shoulder. Who are you going to listen to from within you? Are you going to give into temptation, the devil? Fear? Are you going to let that win? Or are you going to trust your soul? Are you going to trust your heart? And the reason I'm naming all of these things, well, for one, it's important to note as we continue, but for two, no path is purely light or dark, because we have both the lightness and the dark within us. So no matter what path we choose to take, those forces, the soul and the ego, you have within you. That contrast already exists within you. It has to exist within you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to have this experience. So as I said, no path is purely light or dark. That depends on the level of awareness somebody brings to that path. How aware are you of the darkness within you versus the light? Having darkness within you doesn't mean you're evil. It means you're human. It means you have the ego. It means you came down here to choose to learn and grow. Doesn't make you evil. But when you are unaware of the darkness within you, that's when it can get dangerous. And I feel a lot of people in the spiritual community, in the New Age community, in life in general, think they understand their shadow. And this is not me saying I'm perfect, right? But what I've seen through my own experience and what I've witnessed in New Age spaces and in religious spaces is a lot of people think they know the shadow. They think they have it under control, when in reality, it is still running the show subconsciously. And we're going to see this, in my opinion, through her story, her testimony. I'm going to break it down for you. Again, this is no judgment towards her. I'm just breaking down things that I think are really important to bring awareness to and to talk about. But when you're unaware of your shadow, when you're unconscious to it, that's when it is then in the driver's seat, and that can take you down a very dark path. And I think that's what we see in Ella's testimony and her story. And again, this is nobody's fault. We live in a world where we are so disconnected from ourselves. We are so disconnected from ourselves. We have not been taught how to truly love ourselves, right? I don't think I need to over-explain that to you guys. You get it. Look at how dark the world is. And we live in a world where we're so disconnected from our inner voice. We're disconnected from our heart. We're disconnected from the love within us. And we're seeking all of these things outside of us. And when we're disconnected from that voice, when we haven't been taught how to differentiate the two, of course, it makes it a lot easier for the ego to be in the driver's seat. We're taught to think our way through life. The mind, to me, is also an extension of the ego, as the heart is an extension of the soul. The ego communicates with you through your mind. Your soul communicates with you through your heart. And we have been taught to think our way through life as opposed to feel our way through life. So I'm not blaming anybody. It's the reality of the world we live in, but we do live in a dark world. Look at what's going on around us, right? The war, famine, right? There's so much darkness in the world. And I think that's a direct reflection of our internal state. Collectively, as a collective, a lot of people are at war with themselves, are in pain internally which is why we see so much pain and suffering externally. And I'm also not saying one path is better than the other. I'm not saying the New Age path is better than the Jesus path or X path is better than this path at all. Okay, we are all on our own path and we're all right exactly where we need to be on our path. So this is not me saying following Jesus and only Jesus is the wrong path. Okay, I want to make that very clear. I'm also not saying following New Age is the wrong path either. Okay, but what I am saying is that we can find the light and the dark within all paths. And if you follow Jesus and only Jesus, what still matters is the level of awareness you bring to that path, because that path too can be dark if you are unconscious of your wounding. Okay, so now we're going to dive into a few clips that I want to expand on, that I want to speak to. She brings forward a lot of things. Again, her video was 2.5 hours and we're already, after editing, maybe 20 minutes into this video. So buckle up. Yeah, let's dive in. So she describes a lot of trauma in her life, just in general, starting with when she was really young.
And I was born a very sensitive child. I was born with a rare hip condition, which meant that my ball and my socket and my hip didn't connect and they didn't work. So ultimately, I didn't walk. I couldn't walk. My legs were disabled. And so my mom and dad were incredible at bringing me to every doctor under the sun, find doctors and undergo many, many surgeries to eventually lead me to walk. But that led for me spending most of my, just long periods of time in hospital, in casts. I was in the splits for years. Like my legs were literally in the splits. And I remember that being really hard because like coming into this world, I was really scared, unsafe, like incredibly unsafe from a very early age.
You could even see she gets emotional here. Clearly something like that, man, from a young age, she talked about feeling unsafe. My heart goes out to her. That's tough. And that is going to leave markings on you, whether you are conscious of it or not, right? Not her fault or at all, right? A lot of us have difficult childhoods for whatever reason, and it sounds like she had a beautiful support system, which is beautiful. Coming into this world and feeling so unsafe, that in and of itself must be so challenging. So there's a couple other clips here that I want to show you as well, just important for context.
My brother was in boarding school at the time and my parents had divorced at this point. So my mom was working till late. So I would go home and just be by myself for hours.
So talking about her brother in boarding school, her parents got a divorce, which, sometimes divorce is the best thing you can do for your family. I'm not saying it's a bad thing at all. I feel like sometimes people stay together and they should not stay together. But, as a child, regardless of whether that was the best thing for her family or not, right? That's tough, right? Her brother's not being there, going through a divorce. She said she was home alone often.
And to be honest, I loved it. I was in a lot of pain and sadness. And I started going to therapy. She told me I was very depressed. And I remember just thinking like, okay, I have depression, like all these sort of things. So there was just like a lot going on. I would keep all my emotions in. I didn't want anyone to see I was crying. I'd go to my room and cry.
So I think that this is just important to note as well. She's depressed, sad all the time. So there's already a lot going on, and this is in her early years.
I started to feel loneliness times like 100 enhanced the moment I started smoking weed. It was like when I was surrounded by these people, the lonelier I felt and the more ashamed I felt of who I was because I was failing everything. I felt like a loser in school. I felt like I didn't fit in. I had one friend who my ears shut down every class. Like I remember a teacher like trying to ask me to recite what we read yesterday. It was like a chapter in To Kill a Mockingbird and I couldn't reiterate anything and everyone was looking at me like I was the dumbest person alive because I couldn't remember.
So again, there's even more to unpack there, talking about weed, feeling more lonely than ever, feeling dumb, feeling ashamed. This is heavy, right? There's a lot going on under the surface, not blaming her, not shaming her, just making a note of this.
Excitement and like my God of the time was just like the next disco, the next party. And I noticed when I started drinking alcohol, I think I was like 15 years old when I started drinking alcohol. I noticed that, again, the sensitivity was like following me because my friends could drink, like they could knock back drinks. And
so she's going to go on to say she was very sensitive. I too was very sensitive, so I relate to her on this. And she would say she would have minimal alcohol and she would get really sick. I actually experienced the same thing. I'll just let her speak here.
2 cans of cider or like literally 2 shots of a vodka and I would be unconscious. I would be vomiting every night. And it was like a literal thing where we would go to these like discos, it's like underage nightclubs. And I would just be unconscious with my head in a toilet vomiting for the entire night. And that was like a common thing for me. And I was also doing like a lot of crazy diets at the time. I think a lot of teenage girls go through that of just like thinking they need to lose weight and just trying to find their place in the world, so I was just very into that.
So that's something else I want to speak to too. She said going through a lot of diets at the time. A lot of young girls go through that, trying to find their place in the world. I think it's so much more than just trying to find your place in the world. I've had body image issues for as long as I can remember. And for me, this stems from not feeling good enough, right? The world we live in make a lot of women in particular, men as well, but women in particular feel not good enough about ourselves unless we look a certain way, unless we're skinny enough, unless we're beautiful enough, right? Unless our skin is flawless. And a lot of that manifests in body image issues because we feel like we need to be thin or whatever it may be. So obviously she went through that herself. To me, I just want to point out it runs deeper deeper than just trying to find your place in the world, right? When we're always doing diets and stuff like that, there is a deeper reason. And for me, what I've noticed with my journey, it's a wound of unworthiness, a wound of not feeling good enough. And I'm not blaming myself for that, not shaming her for that. It's a result of the society. It's a reflection of the society we live in. And I know a lot of women go through this, but again, just something that's important to note here. There's a lot of wounding. There's a lot of wounding we could see here. There's a lot of trauma that she's been through.
And if I'm being quite honest, I had a lot of fun. I know I'm saying like I got getting sick at nights out, but the nights I didn't, like truly I had a lot of fun. And I see a lot of testimonies where people demonize their past for like drinking being a very bad, abusive thing for me. But I can like hand on my heart say it was a very innocent time for me. It was very fun. I had a lot of fun. I loved like meeting people outside of school, just anywhere I could meet anyone outside of school. Like I was so down. So like I had a lot of fun. I started to get a lot of attention from men. That was like when lust really entered my life because I was very addicted to the attention of men.
So that's another thing, right? Being addicted to the attention of men. As women, often we feel validated or worthy when we get male validation, and that's a result of the patriarchal society that we live in. But something that I want to speak to here is, she said, hand on the heart, that was a very innocent time for me when she was drinking. She talks about how she would go to these discos every week, and I think, based on her testimony, what she was talking about back in the day, drinking was a big part of her life. And I'm not trying to shame her for this at all, but I do want to bring some awareness to this here. We live in a world where alcohol is so normalized, right? Alcohol is often at the center of a lot of parties, a lot of get-togethers, right? Without alcohol, it's like a lot of people feel that they can't have the same experience without alcohol. It's not as fun without alcohol. And I think this is something to bring awareness to, because alcohol, I'm not trying to completely demonize alcohol. Don't get me wrong. I love to have a glass of wine with dinner once in a while, or I like to share a bottle of wine with some friends if we go out to eat, or if they come over and have a girls' night. When I was in Europe, especially when I was in Italy, best believe I enjoyed a glass of wine at dinner quite often. With that said, on a regular basis, alcohol is not even something that I think about. Personally, I have a very healthy relationship with alcohol in my life currently, and I'm not saying she doesn't. I don't think she drinks at all or anything right now, but I'm just bringing attention to this part in her life because in general, a lot of people drink alcohol and unconsciously use it, right? It's become so normalized. It's, innocent. It's just fun. There's nothing wrong with it. But a lot of people use it as a form of coping, a way to numb, right? She was already talking about her life up until this point, and she continuously speaks to how depressed she was, how sad she was. This pain, this sadness, this depression was following her. These are things that she said. So getting introduced to alcohol at 15, this is going to bring some sort of relief, right? And I'm assuming here, but with most people, alcohol brings some sort of relief. Finally, they don't feel the depression anymore. They're having fun. She talked about she loved meeting other people, and that's a beautiful thing. She made connections and whatnot, right? But it's this alcohol, this coping mechanism, this escape. It's a means of escape. It was a way for her to escape her reality, because her reality was rough up until that point. There was a lot that she was moving through. She had a hard time at school. Also talks about how she had dyslexia. So she was in like the dyslexic class. She felt stupid in front of the whole classroom when the teacher asked her to recite something, right? Like these things stick with you in a way that we often don't realize, right? And to me, I'm not saying it was bad that she had these experiences with alcohol. I'm not shaming her for it at all. A lot of people go through this, especially when they're in their teens, because it has been so normalized in this society, which, I don't think it should be so normalized. That's a whole other conversation. But for her, she's talking about how it was innocent, and maybe it was to an extent, but what I'm hearing is escapism. What I'm hearing is numbing, because her life was heavy, and this was something that she could look forward to that allowed her to forget what was going on in her life, what was actually going on internally. It was a way to get away from all of that. I just want to make a note of that, because that is also important as we continue. But then she goes on to say that she had the lead in Greece, which is amazing. She said that it gave her a vice outside of drinking, weed, boys, all of these external things, again, to try to fill a void from within. And it sounds like the musical was beautiful, right? It sounds like that's something that genuinely filled her cup up in a way that I don't think alcohol could, just in general, right? When you're doing something you're passionate about, it hits different, right? When you're doing something that you're good at, she said she had a beautiful singing voice. That's beautiful. So she said she had a better year as a result of that. But what I'm noticing here is it just feels like she was, and again, no judgment, because I'm sure this was similar for a lot of us. Okay. So this is not me judging her. It feels like she was very disconnected from herself. She was going through a lot of pain, and it's not easy to really sit with that, especially when you're that age. I know she was going to therapy and stuff too, but sometimes it's really good for people. Other times it just doesn't do what you hope. But it just feels like there was disconnection from self, right? Using the alcohol, the weed, the boys, the friendships to escape oneself. So I'm seeing a disconnect there.
This pain and depression was like following me. And I kid you not, like this was my first encounter with God. And I felt this light shine down from the heavens. Like I was in the back of math class. There was 3 girls in my math class in this class because we were in the dyslexic class. And I remember hearing this voice as clear as day as I do now. And it said, drop out of school. And I felt peace for the first time in so long.
After she had that good year when she was in the play, it got really hard again and she ended up dropping out of school, which sounds like that's exactly what needed to happen. It sounds like school was not the system for her, and that's a whole other thing, right? We could talk about the systems. I think that all systems need to crumble because I think the education system also needs to change. And this is coming from someone who worked inside the education system. I was a high school teacher for 5 years, and I see how it's not. It's good for some kids, right? But for a good majority of them, it's just not. It's not. But, I'm glad that she was able to do that. It sounds like it did give her a sense of peace. And I just want to say something. You know how I was talking about her being disconnected from herself? I really want to emphasize that's normal. In the world that we live in, that's normal, because we live in a world where we're not taught to feel our way through life, right? We're taught to think our way through life. We're taught to be in the mind. So of course she's going to seek outside of herself, because the world we live in, we're not taught to seek within. And I also think that's why we see such a mental health crisis in the world here on earth, that I think there's a huge mental health crisis in the world right now. And that's nothing to be ashamed of, right? But I believe it stems from the disconnection from within. And I think a lot of people are deeply disconnected with themselves unknowingly. And this is the thing. I think majority of people don't actually realize how disconnected from themselves they actually are. I don't think people realize how much they're actually up here in the mind instead of here in the body. A lot of people are disconnected from their body. I myself was disconnected from my body in a very long time. Only the last few years have I really been coming back into my body. And man, it's been a journey to come back into my body. It's a journey I'm still on, okay? But I just want to speak to that. I think it's important. Okay, so she goes on then to say that her brother introduced her to self-development books. And this is the beginning of a new chapter for her. Okay, so after she dropped out of school, that then became her focus along with work. She mentions how she became like addicted to self-development. I'm just going to show a clip here.
When they were in school, I was either working in a job or running home and studying self-development. And like this became my addiction. Like I was addicted. Like I was listening to like all the OGs, like if you know, like Ty Lopez and Grant Cardone and Gary Vaynerchuk. And to be honest, it was so beautiful because they finally gave me a hope in life.
So I just want to highlight first how she said she was addicted to this stuff. This is a pattern we're going to see continue.
I would listen to podcasts every week. I would read like 1 or 2 self-development books every week. I started making YouTube videos like talking about it at the time. Me and my brother would watch TED Talks every night. Our whole family were hooked on them. Like it wasn't just me, like our whole family were watching TED Talks, seminars, motivational speeches every day, and I became addicted. And so for the next 3 years, like that was my vice.
Not that there's anything wrong with self-development books. I want to make that clear. There's nothing wrong with that. And it sounds like that was a beautiful thing for her at that time. But I do want to highlight the intensity of it. She said she would read 1 to 2 self-development books a week. That's a lot. She said she was addicted to the TED Talks, all of these things. And for 3 years, her life revolved around that. Again, nothing wrong with self-development. You want to read a self-development book, you want to better yourself, that's amazing. But what is concerning to me is the level of intensity, which again, we're going to see a pattern here as this continues. This is not me shaming her for this pattern, but it's an observation that's important to note. And what I notice isn't the content that she's consuming, it's the pattern of intensity and avoidance underneath it. Early on, the escape was drinking, partying, right? Which is common for a lot of people. Again, this is not shaming, but in my opinion, these are very obvious numbing behaviors, whether you're willing to see that within yourself or not. It's a means of distraction. When she stepped away from that, it didn't necessarily mean she turned inward toward herself, okay? Instead, the same mechanism found a more socially acceptable outlet, self-development. Because self-development isn't bad, but when it becomes compulsive or addictive, it can function in the same way substances do. Constantly seeking the next insight, the next book, the next breakthrough, okay, without ever sitting in the discomfort of being with yourself. So rather than moving through the pain, the mind stays busy, right? Constantly reading, constantly searching, constantly diving into more, reaching for something that promises relief, certainty, or identity. And that's the important distinction. Change in behavior doesn't always equal integration. So what I'm seeing is this cycle that's repeating. We have one identity and that collapses. And then there's another identity that collapses. Every time it's like jumping to this other framework that promises safety, structure, or answers. But eventually that identity just continues to collapse because it's not actually giving her what she's seeking. Because again, it's this external seeking outside of oneself. When someone jumps from one extreme to another, it's often not because the new thing is truer, it's often because it gives the nervous system temporary regulation. But from that lens, right, the move from New Age to Christianity to me can look less like an awakening and more like the nervous system once again reaching for something that feels solid and contained after a period of intensity, after a period of chaos. And we're going to dive more into that later. And this doesn't invalidate her experience. It just reframes it, because healing isn't about replacing one escape with a more moral or spiritual one. Healing is about developing the capacity to stay present with yourself even when nothing is distracting you. And that's where transformation actually happens. This is also something I see a lot in New Age spaces. For many people, practices become another way of leaving themselves, another form of disassociation, right? Instead of sitting with what is actually going on internally. Spiritual language may feel evolved and it might look productive. The mind convinces itself it's doing the work when real integration is not actually happening. And that's another thing we're going to talk about. I feel like a lot of people in New Age think they're integrating, or a lot of these words are thrown around about integration and stuff like that. And people are like, yeah, I'm integrating, but they actually have no idea what true integration means. We're going to get more into that later, but that's something to note as well, because later she goes on to say you shouldn't be integrating. And it just makes me question. I'm like, I don't think she actually understands what integration means, because based on her story, I don't see much integration happen through her journey. Not saying no growth has happened. Okay. I'm not saying zero integration has happened, but what I see constantly is jumping from one thing intensely, getting addicted to this next thing, getting addicted to this next thing, constantly consuming, constantly learning more knowledge. She had a lot of knowledge. She knew a lot, right? Because she was consuming a lot.
Because I thought I knew everything, because I had an array of knowledge on anything New Age. Like, I was the most genius person you could come across when it came to knowing of anything.
But there's a difference between knowledge and actually embodying that knowledge. Okay, so we're going to move on to another clip here.
Let's just say I met someone who was very deep in New Age, and he flew over to meet me. I had no idea. So I thought he was coming over as a friend, very naive, but he was very interested in me. And I met him once, and I remember thinking he was crazy. He was telling me about ayahuasca and mushrooms and like the spiritual realm, and like I thought he was crazy.
If you ever meet someone and you get a weird, unsettling feeling, if you think they're crazy, trust that feeling, okay? Trust that feeling, because she meets someone here, and this is who she's talking about, and this person is who introduced her to the whole New Age space, right? And from the beginning, it felt off to her, right? It felt off to her, but because of the disconnection from within herself, she didn't trust that feeling within her. Again, we live in a world where we're taught to ignore that inner voice. I'm not shaming her for it. So trust yourself, you guys. If you feel the energy off with someone, even if you can't articulate why, trust that feeling.
And so I didn't think much of it. I just went home. He rang me and he just started telling me things that God told him. And the only way I can describe what happened in this moment, and I now know, and because I can understand now, this was a very big door that opened for demonic presence, entities, Satan, the devil, enemy, whatever you want to call it. When he said something on the phone, I felt a spirit come into my body, is the only way I can describe it. I felt something fly into my body.
But I do want to talk about the spirit that she said that she felt enter her body. She's mentioned ever since she was young, she was very sensitive to energies. Same, like I totally understand that, because same. So I'm not trying to invalidate her experience, and I want to be very clear about that. Okay, she felt something. I believe her. Energy is very real. People do feel things in their bodies, right? Energy, emotion, and nervous system responses. And those are real experiences. So I'm not saying that I don't believe her or she's lying. But where I think the conversation can get distorted is in how that experience is interpreted afterward. When she describes talking to someone who was deep in the New Age and feeling something fly into her body, that doesn't automatically mean a spirit entered her or that she opened the door to possession. And I know she didn't use that word, right? But a lot of people use that word when spirits are inhabiting your body, like, oh, possession, right? And that can be a very scary word. Just because she experienced something and had a real physical experience, that was her interpretation of what happened based on her new spiritual framework, right? But it doesn't automatically mean a spirit entered her, because it feels like she already had this weird feeling about this person, which she makes very clear. She felt very unsettled, and that can be very overwhelming for the body. So what that can feel like in the body is a rush of adrenaline, a dizziness, pressure in the chest or head, disassociation. It can feel like fear moving through the system. She could have felt some sort of energy. I'm not saying she didn't feel something, right? But when the nervous system is overwhelmed and doesn't have context, the body can interpret that surge that she felt felt as something external invading, when in reality, it's the system going into stress response. The key distinction I want to name here is a felt experience does not automatically equal a metaphysical attack. When she found Christianity, the interpretation of that moment changed. What was once something I felt in my body and I couldn't explain became, I opened a door to demonic presence, or, whatever it is you want to call it, which continues as her testimony goes. She talks about, I was opening all these doors to demonic presence without realizing it. And it doesn't mean that she's lying, right? I don't think she's lying. I believe that these experiences were very true for her and they were felt experiences. Now that her view of the world has shifted, her framework has now shifted, and the memory, therefore, has been recoded. And this happens all the time. Our minds look backwards and reinterpret past experiences through our current belief system. And as humans, we're always shifting, changing. Our belief systems shift and change. So we could look back on an experience and view it differently based on how our perception has shifted in the present moment. And I do want to say, I believe energy is a real thing. Don't get me wrong. And emotional and energetic exchanges definitely happen between people. I personally have experienced getting physically sick in connection with negative energy being sent my way. Now, this is not someone evil or malicious, right? But because human systems do affect each other's systems, and we're learning more about that, right? In this world, we're slowly starting to learn more about that. So I'm not saying none of it was real, but the interpretation can be distorted. Again, it doesn't automatically mean possession. It means we are sensitive organisms, right? And she herself admits to how sensitive she is, right? From a young age. Hi, girl. Okay, so there's another clip that I'm going to show you from later in her testimony that makes sense to speak to now. So I just want to elaborate on this a little bit here.
I know a lot of people don't have that ability to see it, but you should not dabble with any spirit coming into your body. But I'm in a rapé ceremony and I have this spirit come to me. And this spirit says to me, there is a piece of your soul in another galaxy fighting off wars, but we need to bring her down to this world so that you can help humanity ascend. Will you do it? So I'm like, yes. So I literally see a spirit, golden blue goddess of a woman, enter my body and she starts wrapping around my soul. And I kid you not, you guys, I open my eyes and there is another human in me now. It's not just Ella. There is another entire being in me. And I look around and I go, oh my God, I'm back on Earth. Ella's consciousness wasn't there anymore. There was another being in me.
Okay, so I just want to slow down and unpack what that actually could have been. This happened during a rapé ceremony, which we're going to talk more about rapé later. But basically, rapé alters your state of consciousness for a moment, and it increases sensitivity, and it can blur the boundary between your inner world and your perception of energy. In those expanded states, because rapé will expand your state, it's very common to experience a surge of imagery, emotion, or energetic sensation that feels like it's coming from outside of you, even though it's actually arising from within your own psyche or your own energy field. And when she says her consciousness wasn't there, that's not actually proof that another soul entered her body. Maybe it felt like that, and I'm not trying to take away that felt true and real for her in that moment, but it's far more likely that she slipped into a dissociative or trance-like state where a part of her consciousness, a wounded part, a forgotten memory, or even another layer of her psyche took the front seat in that moment. And this can genuinely feel like something outside of me, someone else is in my body. Many people experience this during trauma release, plant medicine, which rapé is a plant medicine. Now, yes, it is possible to blend with spirit. Mediumship is literally, I'm a medium, okay? I do trance mediumship. Mediumship is literally the art of blending your consciousness with the frequency of another soul, right? But blending is not possession. It isn't someone taking over your body. It is subtle, intentional, regulated, and the medium is always aware of themselves. Even when you get into the deep trance states, your consciousness does take more of a backseat, but you're always aware to a level, and you can stop it at any time you want. You're still the one in control. This sort of blending requires grounding, stability, and proper development, which we're going to talk to more about that later as well. So what she likely experienced wasn't actually another soul entering her body or taking over. It was an altered state intensified by the medicine, disassociation from her own sense of self, an inner part or an energetic part of her resurfacing or rising to the surface, or her mind interpreting this experience through the symbolic language of another soul when really it was a piece of her. And everybody has the capacity to sense and blend with energy to some degree. It's human. It's our birthright, okay? It's not supernatural. The difference is whether you understand what's happening and can hold yourself through it, or whether you interpret it as something external, dangerous, or taking control. Sometimes the mind can't understand what's going on, so we perceive it as external. because that's how it makes the most sense to us. The mind, the ego, the psyche is wild, you guys. It's wild. And I've experienced stuff like this before, so I understand how real it feels because I've been there. I get it. And I too have had experience with demons, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Circling back to what we were talking about, she met this guy, and this guy that came into her life believed that she was her twin flame, and she thought he was crazy. Now, this is a whole other topic of conversations. We can talk about twin flames, okay? She believes that it's demonic and you should stay away from that. And she mentions the documentary that's on Netflix, because there is a documentary about, I think it's called Twin Flames Universe or something. Like, there's a documentary and I've watched it, and go watch it, because again, it speaks to the darkness of these spaces. But for me, so I personally have had a twin flame experience myself. Now, I didn't know what twin flames were when my twin flame, I hate using that language. I hate even using that language, because the way it's talked about in new age spaces really just grinds my gears, because, she's right in the sense of a lot of people attach onto these, oh, this is my twin flame, I need to meet my twin flame, it's the ultimate love. And that ends up keeping people in very toxic dynamics, and you shouldn't give a shit about whether you meet your twin flame or not. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. When I met my twin flame, and I even feel weird using that word. I didn't even know what it was, but I was getting the message of twin flame. We went to the beach together, and literally, I kid you not, there was this set of twins that walked right in front of us, these two little kids, and they had bright red hair. And I was just laughing. I was like, twin flame? I was like, that's crazy. Anyways, but what I quickly realized, this person entering my life was acting as a huge catalyst in my growth. It was very intense, because often with these connections, they're very, 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 very intense. And you are a very intense mirror for each other, and it activates you, right? For me personally, it brought out my deepest, darkest shadows, and it also brought out the good sides of me at the same time. And I quickly realized, oh, this is not my person, and I walked away. But I saw it for what it was. I was like, oh, twin flame, a deep and intense activation on my path, a catalyst on my path to help me come home to self, to help me step into the highest version of self, right? And that happened to be, just a part of my path. I have no interest in being with that person. We haven't talked for a very long time. Sorry, girl, my cat is getting in the way. I have no interest in being, with that person. To me, I call him my twin flame still, because that's how it came to me. And I didn't even know what twin flames were before that. And I know it as an intense catalyst on my journey. I'm not trying to be with this person. I don't want to be with this person. I'm not meant to be with this person. The dark side, though, is people attach onto these things. And in her case, this person thought she was her twin flame, and she was harassed by this person. He was making a lot of videos, and it sounds like such an awful experience. So I'm sorry that she had to deal with that and go through that. And if you listen to her testimony, she talks more about it. But I did want to speak to that again. There's these terms in New Age. I resonate with the word twin flame because I had that experience personally. But the way it's distorted in New Age is dark and dangerous. And she kind of was on the receiving end of somebody getting, I think, attached and obsessed with that word and thinking, I have to come into union with my twin flame. Oftentimes, if you do have a twin flame, which it doesn't matter if you do or don't, like it literally does not matter, because this is another thing. A lot of people think that, oh, the twin flame journey is only for really high and advanced souls. Like, shut up. Shut up is like what I want to say to that. Like, we're all on our own path, our own journey. We're all equal. We're all here for different reasons. And for some people, sure, they might meet their twin flame, but that doesn't make you better or more of a high power soul. I could just go on and on and on, right? But it shouldn't matter. And I think the problem lies within attaching to it or trying to seek these things out, trying to find your twin flame. I need to find my twin flame, because that's coming from a place of needing something outside of you, right? To make you feel better about yourself. And that's when it can get really dark. So that video, the documentary she was referring to, is a great documentary to watch, because it does showcase the darkness and how these things can get really dark, right? But it doesn't mean twin flames don't exist. It doesn't mean twin flames are demonic. Like in my experience personally, I resonate with twin flame because that's the only thing that really describes what I experienced. But on my path, I didn't attach onto it because I also realized, oh, I'm not actually meant to be with this person, but we did come together to help me grow on my path. And yeah, it was very intense. And it was the dynamic they often talk about, the in and out, whatever, right? But at the end of the day, it shouldn't matter. You shouldn't focus on it. You shouldn't seek it out, right? This is just an example of she had a very dark experience with it, and now she refers to it as, demonic or whatever. And I can understand why, because she had somebody who thought she was her twin flame that ended up almost harassing her, making hundreds of videos about her. That's terrible, so I understand why she wants to run away from that. But for someone like me, I I do resonate with it because I had that experience, but I also see the darkness in it and I could see how it can go south, but it doesn't mean it is all bad, right? It's the person on the path. You get what I'm trying to say. Anyways.
From one side, didn't believe spirit guides to immediately just believing all this was true. I believed in angels, I believed in spirit guides, and I started to feel presence around me all the time. And I thought this was good presence because this book tells you it's all love and it's God and it's angels. So I'm like, cool. So I'm like feeling all these presences around me and I'm starting to get downloads, if you know, in the new age world. Like these words, these voices that would come in and I was like, this is so cool. And, you know, I would ask for a sign and I would go somewhere and get that sign. And I was like, oh my God, this stuff is real.
Everything I see here, like what she's talking about here to me, this sounds like the beginning of a spiritual awakening, talking about the download she was receiving, the presence that she was feeling. And a lot of people go through this phase, right? When they first start awakening to signs and this other world. And it's not unusual and it can be very exciting, very beautiful. I've experienced this myself. And what matters isn't that somebody awakes, it's how supported and grounded they are when that happens. A spiritual awakening opens perception. It expands the mind's sense of meaning, connection, and symbolism. But if someone hasn't done inner work, right? Emotional processing, nervous system regulation, self-reflection, that expansion doesn't happen through a stable container. And that can be dangerous. If you are awakening and you are not grounded and you are not stable, that can lead to psychosis. It can lead to a lot of darkness, which is common in new age spaces. When there's already patterns of escapism underneath, which we see with her, okay? We've seen the pattern already with the drinking, diving deep into the self-help, self-development, how addicted she was in that world. An awakening then becomes another way to escape, okay? It becomes another way to leave the body or disassociate rather than be in the body. And when somebody isn't grounded, heightened awareness can tip into overwhelm, right? Because she already talked about being very sensitive. So now she's opening up her senses even more to these things. And if you are ungrounded, this can tip into overwhelm, right? Everything feels cosmic. The mind starts stringing things together faster than the body can actually integrate. I have experienced this. I'm not shaming anyone. I've been there before when I went through this massive awakening in a short period of time, and it was very overwhelming. And it was before I was fully grounded. There was a period in my awakening where I was ungrounded, and I'm so grateful to be where I am right now because I was able to come back down. And I feel like a part of the reason why I was able to come back down is because I asked for help on my journey. I prayed to God and I said, help me, because I started to notice my ego growing. I was aware of my ego growing and I was like, this is not good. I was aware enough to ask for help and I prayed and I asked for help. And let me tell you, I was humbled real quick. When this is common, especially now, we're going through mass awakenings on earth and people are awakening at rapid rates, but a lot of people at the same time are disconnected from themselves and wounded. That means your ego oftentimes is driving the show. And when you have an awakening while your ego is driving the show, this is when spiritual ego is born and you feel like I am chosen, I am better, I have special access, I see things in the world the way other people don't see them. My level of consciousness has risen, not because somebody is narcissistic, but because the psyche is trying to anchor itself into something solid. And because we have these wounds that we're unaware of, often we have these wounds, this is collective, of unworthiness, right? We don't feel worthy. So when we're told you are chosen, you are going to feel special because your ego, it's making your ego feel special. If you were rooted and grounded and you knew how to hold that part of you, yes, you would know that you're special, but you would also know that everybody else is equally as special. Therefore, it wouldn't feed your ego because you are aware of your wounds, right? And ego is so much more than feeling chosen, feeling like the chosen one. It's a lot more complex than that. But in some extreme cases, when someone has unresolved trauma or hasn't learned how to self-regulate, that level of stimulation that you experience when you're awakening can begin to blur the lines between inner experience and outer reality. That's when people can feel untethered, dysregulated, or psychologically unsafe. And this is when we see spiritual psychosis. You know, there's so many different forms of psychosis: spiritual psychosis, political psychosis. And when people are going through psychosis, they don't know, they don't realize they're in psychosis, right? They're going to feel that they're sane. They're going to feel that there's nothing wrong. And I get it because I've been on that line myself. I've been there. So I get it. And I'm talking from experience here. And looking back, I realize now how ungrounded I actually was. And everything that I was experiencing was real. It felt very real. But because I was ungrounded, it definitely blurred the lines between internal experience and external reality.
So by the age of 21, I was making six figures. I had gone to Canada and I pursued what I wanted to. I was making a great amount of money at a young age. I was very conventionally beautiful at this time by societal standards. You know, I was successful, I was beautiful, I had a good body because I was working out a ton. I remember being very scared, and I'll tell you why. When you like experience that of getting everything you want and feeling dead inside and feeling nothing, like when I say the moment I hit the peak of everything that I wanted, everything that I visualized, everything that I was manifesting and praying for to actually happen was one of the scariest days of my life, because I felt emptier more than ever. Not only did I feel like a loser and like shame and embarrassment, like it was amplified by 100. It was like how I felt as a kid growing up times a million.
And something else I want to speak to is manifestation. You know, she achieved everything through mindset, you know, self-development. She manifested her dream reality, but she was still feeling so empty inside, right? And this is something else often in the spiritual community. Let's manifest your dream life, manifest this. And a lot of people are manifesting from a place of, again, ego, trying to achieve all of their goals. What that is control. It's, again, living from the mind. It's being in the mind, trying to control the outcome of your life, right? It's not actually surrendering and trusting the path, right? Because if you fully trusted the path, you would not be trying to manifest your dream reality, because you would understand that your highest timeline, the timeline that has all of your most fulfilling things on it, is already there for you. That path is already there for you. Your only job is to align to the path, not to try to control how that path or when that path comes in. So that's a whole other topic of conversation, you know, that I can get into. But, you know, she basically says she manifested everything in her life and she was still empty inside.
As I moved back to Ireland, I decided that I was going to go full-blown devotion to my healing, because obviously before, for all these years, I was just trying to empower myself and feel better, and then hitting the peak of everything that I wanted and it filling me with emptiness. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to heal myself now, because I'm depressed. I'm still depressed. I still feel awful. I still feel all of this. I had no friends. Still, I felt very lonely.
So I just want to acknowledge this here, okay? There's real awareness surrounding the healing work that needs to be done. You know, realizing that you need to heal is huge. It's step one. But some of the things she says are also important to look more closely at. But first, I'm gonna...
And I was, again, hooked and obsessed in this world. I remember I would wake up, and I was renting an apartment at the time, and I would close my blinds, black out my room. I would get an amethyst crystal. I had so many crystals at this point, and I would just meditate on my third eye every day for hours. I would listen to frequency music, and I got addicted to this ability to heal. So before, I kind of felt like I held every emotion in. So I just went into a full-blown like crying spree for about a year. I had this ability. It was crazy. What I would do is I would hover my hand above my body, and I would slowly compress. And the minute I would get an inch to my skin, I would be shot with a childhood memory of trauma or something I suppressed. And I got addicted to this because I was doing it on every part of my body. And the minute I would remember an image in my subconscious, and I would burst out crying. And I remember for the first time feeling so alive, because I was like, okay, I'm really healing myself here. Like, I'm starting to feel things that were suppressed and never felt. And so that is kind of what happened. I started channeling angels a lot. I had a lot of angel numbers. I was crying every day because I was healing. And, you know, I think a part of it was very beautiful because I was truly allowing myself to feel for the first time. But what I now know was the things that I was opening myself up to, these spirits, these beings, it was just going to get it 10 million times worse. Because this is the thing with New Age, is you open one door, it's never enough, and you're working with sources that you do not want to be messing with, is all I can say.
Okay, so she mentions she had no friends. She mentions being lonely, right? And being completely immersed in the spiritual and mystical. To me, that signals isolation, not integration, okay? Healing does not happen in isolation. When somebody is already ungrounded, pulling away from real human connection can actually destabilize them further. She also talks about becoming obsessed, right? Here's this pattern again. She was talking about meditating for hours a day, right? She talks about becoming obsessed, even addicted to this healing ability, spending hours a day meditating. You guys, that's not normal to be spending hours and hours a day alone meditating. I like to meditate, don't get me wrong, but do I spend hours a day every day meditating? No. Crying every day for a year, again, and I want to be clear, crying during healing is normal, especially at the beginning, especially when emotions first start surfacing, especially if you've suppressed them for so long. There's nothing wrong with that. You absolutely should feel emotions. They should move through you. You don't want them trapped in the body, okay? I've experienced this myself, and when I first really started getting into healing for a chunk of time, about 6 months, I do remember crying every day as well. Not for hours and hours and hours, but a lot was starting to come to surface, and this distinction matters, okay? Feeling emotions is not the same as integrating them. Meditation and inner focus can help somebody connect more deeply, but for others, especially those with trauma already or tendency towards disassociation, which we've seen with her already, meditation can then become another way of leaving the body instead of inhabiting the body. When somebody says they're addicted to accessing memories and emotions, to me, that raises a red flag, not morally, but psychologically, because it suggests that the nervous system is chasing intensity, not resolution. A suppressed memory coming up is step one. That's great. She was accessing suppressed memories. However, the integration that comes after is the most important piece here. here. The grounding, the self-soothing, the embodiment, and bringing those insights into daily life and relationship. Without that, the same memories will just replay. The same emotions will loop. The crying will continue, not because healing is happening, but because it's incomplete. If she is accessing multiple memories a week because she said she was addicted to this ability she had, I'm not saying this ability wasn't real. She's very sensitive. She clearly has intuitive gifts, which we all do, right? I'm not saying that wasn't real. However, what's concerning is the amount of memories she was tapping into, because she said she was addicted to this. She would do this, a memory would surface, she would cry, she would do it again, cry. What that tells me, there's no room for integration here. There's no room for integration here. All she's doing is accessing memories, reliving the experience, and yes, feeling it, that's a part of it, but she's not actually integrating anything here. Because when something happens, it creates a wound. And that's the part that you want to heal. It's more than just feeling the emotion and replaying that memory. How can you love that part of you? How can you give that wound love that it so desperately needs? How can you soothe yourself and give yourself what you needed at the time but didn't receive at the time, right? That is the integration work, and that takes time. So if she has this ability for memories to resurface, if you were to have that ability, what I would say is that's amazing. You can access that, definitely access that, but don't continually access that. Access one wound at a time, one memory, and then sit with that. What wound did that cause in my body? How can I now integrate this into my real life? So when this wound is activated again in every day, in the here and the now, how can I self-regulate? How can I soothe myself? Because integration is something a lot of people talk about in the spiritual community, as I mentioned before, or in spiritual spaces. Oh, don't forget to integrate, and these words are being thrown around. But I believe that many people don't actually know what those words mean. We're talking about integration here. That's an example. There's other words like that are also thrown around that people think they know the true meaning of, but really the meaning of the word gets lost. Integration isn't just feeling an emotion. It isn't just crying. It isn't just remembering something painful. Integration is what happens after the emotion surfaces, and that is the most important part. It looks like slowing the nervous system back down, making meaning of what came up, learning how to stay present with yourself, and then it's bringing that awareness into your real everyday life, relationships, into boundaries, into choices. If your spirituality or your religious beliefs are not making everyday life easier, question whether or not you are using it as another form of disassociation, because your spiritual reality or your religious beliefs, right? The point of it is to make everyday life easier. So if it's not doing that, there's potential that you are using it as another form of escape or disassociation. If you keep accessing memories, the same memories or different ones, the same grief, the same pain, but nothing in your life actually changes, that's not integration, that's repetition. And repetition can feel productive because it's intense. It feels like you're doing something, but intensity is not the same as true healing. And that's how people get stuck in cycles of healing. And we see this a lot in the spiritual community. A lot of people getting stuck in the cycle of healing, feeling like they need to do more, and then they become addicted to trying to resolve or fix themselves. And I have a whole podcast episode on this on my Multiple Truths podcast, and it's called You're Not a Constant Project. I'll have that link down below if you're interested in listening to it later. But this is how people get stuck in cycles of healing, which can be very painful. Constantly processing and constantly releasing and constantly uncovering, but never actually stabilizing in the body or in the nervous system. The nervous system becomes used to emotional activation. Big breakthroughs, right? Big releases, big catharsis become the anchor instead of calm, safety, and embodiment. And at that point, healing then becomes another identity, another place to live, another place to reach for. Similar to the self-development that she was diving into, all of the books, all of the this. Now it's switched to healing. Real healing eventually will bring less intensity, not more. It'll bring more steadiness into your life. It'll bring more presence into your life, and it'll give you more capacity to live. And that's the difference between healing that opens you up and healing that keeps you looping. What I hear from her story, unfortunately, and I'm not blaming her or shaming her, is she was stuck in a loop. And that can be very traumatic. That can be very painful. And another thing that I want to address here, she says something about the thing with New Age, you open one door and it's never enough. She's talking about how New Age, you open one door and it's never enough. But what I'm actually noticing here is the same pattern repeating now just within the framework of New Age. She's now demonizing New Age, but I've seen that this pattern has started before New Age. The core experience is the same here. Nothing external was ever satisfying or stabilizing her. It's the same pattern of seeking something externally. And I'm going to show some more examples of this intense seeking externally. Now, this is within the framework of New Age, but again, it's the same pattern.
I want to say with all of New Age is like, you get highs, you get these moments of highs and you think it's working. And then you just hit this plateau and you're like needing the next high. So up until that psychic awakening, I was like, okay, goddess work, that's what I want to do now. So I got really into yoga. I was doing yoga every single day. I think I did it for like 180 days straight. I went to the beach every morning and I would do yoga, and I got really into my holistic phase.
So that right there, right? 180 days in a row of yoga. That's super intense. That's a lot. Not that there's anything wrong with that, right? But again, just showcasing this pattern.
So essentially I move home and I get really into angels, like at a different level. For that year, like, yeah, I made an angel room in my apartment and I'm starting to talk to angels more than humans.
So that is very concerning, okay? If you're living in this other world more than in this world, that's concerning. And she even said, I got really into angels more than what's normal. She made a whole angel room in her apartment. You know, one thing I like to say is the most spiritual thing you can do is be human. You know how she was saying she was talking to angels more to humans? That's disassociation, using spirituality as escape.
I start researching like souls, and I'm like researching starseeds and crystal souls and all of this, and I believe I'm a crystal soul, and I'm like, oh my god, okay, I volunteered to come to this planet to help it ascend. Like I came here to raise the vibration of the planet. Like this is my purpose.
So she got really into crystal souls, and this is another thing. Nothing wrong with crystal souls. I think I talk about it a little later in this video, but it's like a lot of people in New Age really attach onto these identities. You know, it's again finding something outside of you to attach onto, which can be dangerous.
I get really into nature worship and nature connection because at this point, you know, I've done the goddess work, I've done the sensual embodiment work, I've done psychic work, I've done chakra clearing, I've done psychic work, angel work, mindset work. Then I moved to yoga, still wasn't enough. I go to Lapland, I start giving psychic readings, still not enough. And then I move home and I'm doing angel card readings, tarot readings, the angel stuff, still wasn't enough. It was like the more I started to burrow into this world, the bigger the hole was getting.
Regardless of what it is, whether it's within the framework of New Age or not, the more you seek outside of yourself, the bigger the hole is going to get.
And when I say it became an addiction, you guys, like I bought like 60 to 70 card decks. I'm not even joking. I kept buying them. Like I couldn't stop. So I start buying all these card decks and then I get addicted to the cards. Every single day I'm channeling messages for myself. And the more I started to do this, the more anxiety I was getting. And I only can see that now, but at the time I didn't.
60 to 70 cards. I'm a card reader and I do have a pile of cards myself because I do readings here on the YouTube, which, you know, I'm going to be doing a lot less of. However, I don't even have 60 to 70 cards. Again, she uses the word addictive, right? This addiction. It's like she's constantly seeking outside of yourself. That's not healthy, regardless of what framework you're under.
The thing with a lot of New Age, like goddess work, it sounds so pretty, or tarot cards, it sounds pretty. It's packaged in such a pretty way, but what you cannot see is the true thing that you're dealing with is demonic, and it is so dangerous. And I can only see that with sober eyes now because of everything I went through and how not normal it was.
Yeah, it wasn't normal what she went through, but she's putting the blame on New Age. And to me, I don't think the blame should be on New Age. I think this is another way of escaping what's really going on inside, not actually looking at the problem, because she's right. It is not normal to be that addicted to all of these things outside of yourself, right? And again, this is the result of the world we live in. A lot of us are disconnected from ourselves. And of course, we're searching for more. She got into the New Age world and started diving in all of these things. If you are doing readings for yourself every day, you should not be going to readers every day. Tarot, you know, some people, I notice people that go from New Age to Christianity, oh, it's the devil, you're opening up portals to demons, when in reality, again, I believe the devil and God lie within you. The ego versus the soul. When you grab a deck of tarot cards and you pull cards for yourself, what energy are you in? Are you in an energy of needing external validation? Are you in an energy of seeking outside of yourself? Because that's an egoic energy, right? And as I say, the ego is an extension of the devil. So of course, that's dark energy. That's dark energy. If you are giving your power away, that is dark energy. That is not good energy. It doesn't mean the tarot cards in and of itself are dark and demonic. It's the intention and the energy in which you use them. If you are centered in the heart space and you are not looking for anything outside of you, but you are open in love to see if there is a message for you, not needing anything outside of you, because she said she was pulling cards for herself every day, needing messages every day, that's not healthy. That is not healthy. That is coming from an egoic place. And as I say, we have the devil and the ego within us, the devil and God within us, the ego and the soul, right? It sounds to me this need, this obsession was coming from a place of needing external validation. It was coming from an egoic place. So yes, it's going to bring out the darkness. It's using the tarot cards in a dark energy. It's not the tarot cards that are dark. It's the way in which you use them. That distinction is important.
But you have to be so care because you are in active agreement with these spirits that are not love and light. They're not pretty. Anyway, we're going to go into that later.
And we're going to talk more about these demons that she keeps referring to. I'm going to mention it right now. Like I've had an experience with a demon before. I'll just give you I have a whole video on it, but I'll share my experience really, really quickly here. So what I came to learn from my experience, basically, we all have wounds, right? And this is not to shame anybody. It's the world we live in. She herself has been through a lot of trauma. She has a lot of wounds. I have a lot of wounds. Like we all have a lot of wounds, right? And this is no judgment or anything like that. But when we have a wound from within us, the ego, the psyche is, a lot more powerful than we actually realize. And when there's a wound within us, the way it was described to me, it's almost like this energy that's created from within you, or this consciousness that's created from within you to protect you from that wound. And because it was created from the ego, right? Because it's a wound, it's something that hurts. Because it's created from the ego creates this to protect you. That's the darkness within you, right? We have the soul. When we give these wounds love, when we're aware of these wounds, because first we need to be aware of these wounds so that we can give it love and actually integrate it. When you give it love, you heal the wound. But if you're not healing the wound, the ego wants to protect you. Therefore, it can create a consciousness from within you that's not of the light. And that consciousness from within you can take over. It's not true to who you actually are, because you're love at the end of the day. Your soul is love at the end of the day. But we came down here for the polarity. So coming down to earth, we are born with the ego because it's necessary for that contrast, as I described in the beginning. So what happened with me, I became aware of this demon within me, but it wasn't something outside of me. It was a demon created from within myself. My ego created it. My own psyche created it to protect me. And I was unconscious of it. And because it was created from within me, it would take over sometimes without me even realizing it. And when I then became aware of it, I was able to cast it away or send it away in love, but it's not as simple as just sending it away. Yes, I could get rid of it, which she talks about later, how Jesus, dispelled all of these demons or cast out all of these demons from within her. And we're going to get more to that later. But with my experience, I was able to send it out away in love, but that's not enough. I then had to heal that wound and give love to that wound, because if you still don't give love to that wound will just create another consciousness from within you. This is why we see murderers or people do heinous acts. It's not these external things coming into them. It's a result of their own internal wounding, and then what is then created from within them, and the darkness that's created from within them. No, it's not true to who they actually are, because you are love at the end of the day, right? It's not true to who you are, but it was created within you. You create it, you tame it. People who are murderers, this is why we say like, oh, something just came over me. I don't know what came over me. Or, people will say, I just saw blackness in their eyes. Yeah, it's because it's the darkness from within them. It is a part of them. It's a part of their psyche. It's a part of their ego. That again, we need the ego for this experience. So it is a part of you right now in this reality, but it's not true to your soul, because your soul is love at the end of the day. Does that make sense how I'm trying to explain it? So I feel like, her talking about these demons that she was in agreement with, really it was parts of herself she was in agreement with. Parts of her own psyche, the darkness from within her that maybe created different consciousnesses from within her that she was communing with, that she was addicted to, that kept telling her to go back for more. You need to search for more outside of you. These things were created to keep you safe at the end of the day, but the human psyche is crazy. The ego is so complex, you guys. Okay, guys, editing Brittany here. There will be a few of these clips where I pop in because as I'm editing, I'm like, oh no, I missed saying that. I really tried not to have any of these in this video, but that's okay. We're here. Anyways, something that I wanted to clarify that I don't feel I did properly in the video is I want to talk about energies. So I do speak to the ego, and I talk about how the ego has the ability to create consciousnesses from within you, and these consciousnesses can then take over these fragmented parts of self that often we externalize as something other, right? Because it's the way our mind makes sense of these internal voices that don't feel like they're actually coming from us. So I do believe that. I also do believe that external energies can affect you. And here's the nuance though. I don't necessarily believe these external energies have these malicious consciousnesses and they're like, I'm evil and I'm looking for prey. I'm looking for someone I could prey on. That personally I don't resonate with. I personally believe that as humans here on earth, energy obviously affects us, as everything is energy. We are energetic beings and there's energy literally everywhere, right? Everything is energy. if you were to go to a party, for example, and maybe there's really great energy in the room, right? The influence of the party can then influence you, and therefore you're then filled with good energy, and that can influence you. That can have a positive effect on you. The same way I believe you can go to another party, and let's say it's really dark energy, and then that dark energy then infiltrates you and influences you, and then you're influenced to do dark things. And as I said before, I've had negative energy sent my way, not maliciously, but as a result of that, I was very ill. I actually was physically sick for like a month and a half, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And then I later realized, I'm not going to get into details, but essentially I realized it was energetic parasites, whatever it is you want to call it, that was subconsciously, not maliciously, right? Not maliciously sent my way, that infiltrated me. It wasn't like these parasites were looking for me to prey on, but it was energy that was created, real energy that was created from somebody else who disliked me or was upset with me, and the energy was sent my way. And because I was vulnerable, it infiltrated me and it did affect me. However, what I also believe is, I believe these outside energies, they don't always have the ability to infiltrate you if you have energetic boundaries and if you are aware of your wounds. These outside energies that are ugly, so to speak, or evil, whatever it is you want to label it, they do prey on vulnerability. But when I use the word prey, I don't necessarily mean they have a consciousness and they're seeking to prey. It's more so just something they're attracted to, kind of like atoms. Like atoms are attracted to different atoms, right? It's like they're finding a match. But the only way for that match to happen is if there's an opening within you that's vulnerable. And these openings stem from wounded parts of us. And if we are unaware of those wounded parts of us, there is then an opening for this outside energy to come in and infiltrate. So often in Christianity and religion, they label these things as demons and it's demonic and there's a lot to fear, which again takes the power away from yourself. And in reality, I believe that it's nothing to fear. You should not fear these outside energies, because really these outside evil energies or evil forces truly have no power over you if you understand your inner landscape and if you understand your inner woundings. My example, for example, when I got physically sick, I was infiltrated with that negative energy because there was a wounded part of me that felt judged, that felt misunderstood, and wanted to be accepted by these people. That was my vulnerability there. I didn't know how to give that love to myself. There was a part of me seeking that external validation, and I wasn't fully aware of it at the time because I told myself I didn't care about their opinion. But in my inner landscape, what was really going on, there was still a part of me that was seeking their external validation. Therefore, that wound, there was an opening, and the energy, that judgment or whatever that they sent my way did affect me, but I allowed it to affect me. Of course, not consciously, but subconsciously. And instead of holding myself through it, I then became vulnerable and susceptible to dark energy. But that energy would have had zero power over me if I was able to give that love to myself. And we're human. We're here to learn. We're here to grow. We're here to experience. So it's okay if these outside energies infiltrate you. And you know what I mean? It's like, we're not perfect. For me, that one lesson was a huge lesson in having energetic boundaries and becoming more aware of my internal landscape. So yeah, it was hard, but I learned and I grew as a result of it. So I don't necessarily believe these outside energies are these evil demonic forces that are maliciously looking for people to prey on. It's energies that are real because everything is energy. And as humans, we create energy and X, Y, and Z. And I do believe that these energies definitely have the ability to infiltrate different people. But that's only if there's a wound and there's an opening that can then allow the energy to come in. But to me, that doesn't necessarily equal demon or demonic. I believe that when things do create its own consciousness, it's when it's created from within yourself, because your psyche is a lot more complex than we actually realize. And that is a lot different than external energies. Just like there's good things externally too, right? There's good external energy that can also influence you in a positive way. It's the same thing with negative energy. It's nothing to fear at all, but the more aware you are of it and the more aware you are of your internal landscape, the less it has power over you, the less it will affect you. So the key to all of this is becoming aware of oneself. The more aware you are, the more aware you are of your inner world and your wounds, the less any outside source has power over you, the less susceptible you will be to these external forces, because you simply won't be an energetic match for them. Right? Like I said, I don't think they have a consciousness and they're trying to trick you to, infiltrate you. They're simply attracted to their energetic match, like certain atoms, right? Certain atoms are attracted to certain atoms. It's this magnetic pull, and certain atoms it's the opposite of that, right? They are not attracted to other atoms. I'm not going to get the science behind atoms, but that's the analogy that's coming to mind, if that makes sense. Simply, are you an energetic match to them or not? And if you are, because you're vulnerable and susceptible, because you are unaware of your internal landscape, then you will be a magnet to them and you will attract them, and they can infiltrate you, and yes, they can affect you. So your defense to that, right? Again, it's nothing to be afraid of, but in order to combat that, it's becoming aware. And I see a lot of lack of awareness within the New Age space, within Ella's testimony, within the Christian path, just in society in general. And again, I'm not saying I'm perfect. There's, I'm sure, a lot of things that I'm unaware of from within myself too, but that's a part of life. That's a part of this experience. So it's nothing to be ashamed of. So I just wanted to mention that, because it's not like I don't believe outside energies exist at all. Like, I definitely do believe that's real. And with New Age versus Christianity, whatever, we use different language to label these things, to make sense of these things. But this is a whole other topic of conversation I can go on about. I don't think it's black and white, and I'm also not claiming to know everything, but that is just my understanding. Back to the video. A lot of us have troubles really looking at that part of us because we don't want to admit the darkness within us, because we feel like we're good people. I'm a good person. What do you mean? I don't have that darkness within me. You are a good person. Of course, we're love at the end of the day. But it's acknowledging, yes, there is darkness within you. It doesn't mean you're evil. It's because we need it for this experience, which is your ego. It brings you that polarity. It brings you that contrast. You can't just ignore or deny that part of you. If you do, that part of you will run your life subconsciously for the rest of your life. And that's what I see happening here.
I didn't mention throughout this entire time is I'm hyper addicted to psychic readings. Hyper addicted. Like, I'm going to a psychic and a lot of it would be true. And then they would just tell me something shattering that would break my heart. You're getting life spoken over you. You are getting covenants spoken over you. Same as astrology, same as all these things. It's like two truths and a lie. These spirits will give you lots of glorifying things, and that's why you think it's helping you. And then there'll be one thing that will send you on a path you're not meant to go down. So at this point, I'm like super addicted to the temporary piece they're giving me. I'm getting one at least every month. I was constantly getting these at this.
That's so unhealthy, you guys. That's so unhealthy. And no, that's not normal. Okay, you should not be relying on anything outside of you in that way. I'm a reader myself. And when people ask me how many readings should I be getting, I'm like, maybe once a year, maybe once every couple of months. It depends, like I myself like to get readings for myself once in a while, but it's more so for fun. I'm like, let's see what comes through. Or if I'm like hoping to receive some sort of confirmation, but it's not to receive answers. It's not because I'm relying on something outside of me to give me peace. She even said she was hyper addicted to these readings. That is relying so heavily on something outside of you. That is really unhealthy, you guys. And something important to mention here, when you go to receive a reading from anybody, it is so important to carry discernment into that reading and to not take the reader's words at face value. It is so important to feel into what feels good for you and what doesn't feel good for you, because any reader at the end of the day, they're human. And as readers, sometimes they might unconsciously, not that they mean to, but they might accidentally misinterpret a message from spirit, because they might be filtering the truth of that message through the lens of their own ego, therefore distorting the message. Also, before you get a reading, it is so important to do your research. Who are you getting a reading by? Who are you getting a reading from? Hi, honey. I know, you poor baby. Do your research before you get a reading from somebody. You shouldn't just be getting a reading from just anybody. And I recommend going to readers who are evidence-based. What that looks like is they're not just talking shit out of their ass. They're providing evidence before providing a message. So what that might look like is any evidence that would validate to you that they're not talking shit out of their ass. So for example, if you go to a mediumship reading, because this is how I do mediumship, this is how I was taught and trained. When I do mediumship, I don't just say, oh, your grandfather's here and he has this to say to you. It's, the energy that I'm blending with feels like a grandfather. He feels like he would have passed from some sort of lung cancer. He feels like when he was in life, he was larger than life. He was and he's also making me feel like you specifically have a bracelet that he gave to you that you're wearing right now. And then I would ask, does that make sense to you? And then the sitter, the person receiving the reading, right, is like, oh my God, yes, that's evidence so that you know that the reader is actually connecting to your grandfather and not just spewing shit. Because unfortunately, a lot of people in this realm, in this space, because this space is very unregulated, just talk shit out of their ass. So I shouldn't laugh. But, not that people aren't connecting at all, but a lot of people are underdeveloped. Anyways, it's seeking out evidence-based readers, and the way that might look like in psychism, for example, when I do my psychic readings, before just diving into the message, I tune into what's going on currently. Does it make sense that this is on your mind right now? Or does it make sense that you're moving through this right now? Does it make sense that this is going on in your life right now? I'm providing evidence so that you know I'm actually tuning into the energy correctly, and I'm not just, again, talking shit out of my ass. So when you go to readers, for one, you need to be so careful of who you go to, because she mentions how, there's some truths and some things that make you go down a dark path. Like, to me, a few things could be happening here. Either one, you're not going to a reader who is fully developed and they're misconstruing the evidence or the message that's coming through. And two, you yourself don't have discernment going into these readings, because if you're just listening to the reader and doing whatever they say just because they say that they're receiving this message from spirit, again, that's outsourcing your power. And yeah, that can take you down a dark path if you don't know how to discern, if you're not connected to your inner voice. So yeah, I just wanted to speak to that as well. And it's not normal, but again, not the fault of New Age. It's the lack of awareness within self.
I'm worshiping the cacao. I think cacao is God. I'm like looking at cacao and I'm like, you are my God. I call earthly spirits, because this is when I start getting into like fairies and gnomes and like the spirits of the underworld, because I could see them, by the way, because I was also studying shamanism at the time. So I'm like calling all these spirits to come into my room, into my cacao, and I drink that cacao, and then I blow rapé up each nose 2 rounds every day. Like, if you guys don't know, it looks like you're doing drugs, like you're blowing powder up your nose, and you would have this spiritual high. And I would then connect with these spirits and ask them what they wanted me to do today, and they would tell me what to do. So I think I'm in this like mystical world, and decide to study shamanism. So I do a shamanic practitioner training. I get qualified in that. I learn shamanic Reiki practitioner training. So I'm studying that every month, doing trainings with people. We're learning how to do like divination, like shamanic journeying. So I start getting really into the earth and journeying into other realms.
So again, diving heavily into another part of New Age, seeking something else outside of herself. I think that's all, self-explanatory.
So I start going into light language training. So I start training as a light language facilitator. I'm like, maybe it'll be in light language. I start doing light language every day and I get these crazy highs.
So again, it's like I start light language, trying something else. And I want to talk about light language. Like I do light language myself. So I'm not saying these things are bad or anything like that. But, with light language specifically, I just want to speak to this really quickly. Like my experience with light language, it wasn't like choosing to do light language training. Not saying like you can't do that. But for me, it's something that just started happening. Like it just literally in meditation one day, it just came online, whatever it is you want to call it, without me seeking it. I feel like the problem with a lot of New Age, just in general, is people go out and seek these things. I want to go seek light language. I want to go seek this. I want to do this. And there's nothing wrong with learning something if you want to like learn Reiki or anything like that. Like I'm not necessarily saying you shouldn't, but I feel like a lot of people seek outside of themselves. And I feel like things that are on your path will come to you. They'll unlock within you, or maybe you'll feel really excited and lit up about something. And then all of a sudden you see a course for it. And maybe you are being guided to, take that course for it. What I see with her is a lot of external seeking for something more, and a lot of consumption. She talked about how earlier it was all in the mind with all the self-development, but I see that same thing with the spirituality. It's a lot of consumption. She's consuming, and it's like, okay, again, well, you can consume a lot of knowledge, but if you're not actually giving that knowledge time to land in the body, there's no change actually happening here. And again, there's difference between knowledge and embodiment.
I got really into womb work again. I'm painting wombs every day. And I'm just at this point exhausted. I'm like, I keep trying to find like God in so many things, and it's never enough.
It's never going to be enough if you're seeking from outside of you. Again, regardless of what framework you're diving in.
I tried every single thing before this. I tried family constellations. I did Reiki practitioner training. I did shamanic training. I did breath work. I did ayahuasca. I did Kundalini activations. I did womb work. I did Joe Dispenza's meditations. I did subconscious reprogramming, NLP. I did psychic mediumship work, tarot reading, angel work, crying, just feeling my emotions, somatic therapy. I think I said womb healing, internal womb massages, ecstatic dance, cacao ceremonies, women's circles. Like, there's even more. I cannot even think. Astrology. I paid thousands on astrology this year. And after I was just more confused. I even was just like, I don't believe in any of this anymore. Like, it's just designed to confuse you and separate you from God.
See, now here I'm getting emotional. Listening to that genuinely makes me sad for her. And, this is not just her. A lot of people get stuck in these cycles, right? It's like trying so desperately to connect with God, knowing that there's more for yourself, but not knowing where to look. And I'm not trying to cry right now. And it's sad because a lot of people get stuck in these cycles. And I got swept up in it for a little while myself, so I get it. And again, I'm not judging or anything else, but you could see this example here of how much she was seeking externally. Going back to what I was saying before, it's the same pattern that keeps repeating. Just because it's within the framework of New Age, right? It doesn't mean New Age is the problem in and of itself. When someone keeps reaching for more guidance, more signs, more answers, it's because they haven't learned how to ground back into themselves yet. You can see from all of those clips, that's a lot, right? She was dabbling in a lot. To me, that's, as I said, constant consumption. Where is there room for authentic integration of those modalities that she's learning? There isn't room. So again, it's the pattern of avoidance that simply shape shifts over time. My cat is on my lap if you see me like looking down here. We need a baby girl. We need a baby. And on the outside, the dangers with a lot of this too, on the outside, it looks good. It looks like growth because the behavior appears healthy, but the core energy of it is often the same. And that is running from oneself, avoiding discomfort, and grasping for something external to fill a void internally. And she says she carried sadness with her through her whole journey, right? She didn't resolve the pain. She just swapped the coping mechanisms. And this is something that I see a lot in New Age circles, right? This is not just her. Again, I'm using her testimony as an example because it's a good example of the darkness within New Age, like how people get sucked in it. But again, I don't believe New Age is to blame. It's the lack of awareness within the people walking that path, if that makes sense. And for many people, spirituality becomes a way to disconnect further instead of return home. And when I say return home, I mean return home to oneself, to your body, because your body is your home. It's the temple, right? Your body is a temple that God gave us. What a miracle. Your body is a living miracle. Thank you. And so many of us just want to disassociate from our bodies because it feels so uncomfortable in our body because our body is so unregulated. It's so dysregulated. The nervous system's not regulated because of so many wounding. So we don't feel safe in our body. So we like to escape, whether that be through drugs, alcohol, through spiritual modalities, plant medicine, escapism, distractions. Your spirituality or religion should bring you more home into your body because we're here to be human. We're here to live this experience. We're here to be in our body, this miraculous body that God gave us. And what's really happening is the mind is doing all of this. It's not the heart. It's not the body. It's the mind that's creating these outside identities to latch onto, right? It's all the ego. And that's why it doesn't heal anything. That's why it doesn't actually heal anything. It just becomes a more beautiful form of distortion. And another red flag I often see in New Age spaces, just in general, is when someone begins to identify with spirituality as their entire personality. When practices, labels, archetypes, spiritual gifts, and beliefs become who they are. Because when spirituality becomes an identity, it stops being a path of truth and becomes a shield. People cling to spirituality because it gives them a sense of belonging that they've never had, right? It gives them language for their pain. It gives them a role to play, or it gives them meaning in life. It makes them feel important and needed. It gives them a way to avoid confronting what's actually going on internally. But spirituality was never meant to replace your identity. Spirituality is meant to support your human life. It was not meant to consume it. As I said, the most spiritual thing you can do is be human. If your connection to spirituality or religion or Jesus or whatever makes you feel less grounded, less stable, more isolated, or more dependent on external tools, more dependent on outside resources, then it's not spiritual growth. It's another form of avoidance. And again, that's the pattern I see here, okay? In my opinion, opinion, she didn't find, and I say this gently, she didn't find spirituality. She used spirituality to run from herself in a more socially acceptable way, subconsciously. So there's something else that I want to speak to here. I want to talk about grounding, because she mentions a few times in her testimony how people told her like, oh, she just needs to ground. She needs to root in. Just going to insert a little clip here.
And is this going to like stabilize, you know? And then the spiritual community tell you to integrate it and just like root it in. So then I spent a lot of time in nature and on the beach and thinking it's integrating, and I'd be walking barefoot and grounding and like feeling more ungrounded than ever. It was like, it was never enough.
So there's a difference between being grounded and grounding exercises. And this, I feel, is something that maybe she didn't fully understand. A lot of people think grounding is just standing barefoot on the earth, spending more time in nature, go walk bare feet on the grass or in the ocean, or visualizing roots going down into the earth from your feet, right? Or whatever it may be. Those are grounding practices. And yes, they can be supportive. I'm not telling you not to do those things, but that's different than being a grounded person, okay? A grounded person is somebody who can feel their emotions without being swept away by them, okay? Instead of spiraling, disassociating, or chasing intensity, they're able to sit with what arises and respond to that rather than react. A grounded person can hold a sense of center even when life gets chaotic. Grounding is nervous system stability. It's the ability to stay connected with yourself, whether you're in meditation or whether you're in traffic, whether you're having a mystical experience or whether you're paying your damn taxes. Being a grounded person takes responsibility for their own choices, okay? They don't outsource their power to astrology, to spirits, to signs, to synchronicity, to downloads or external forces. They understand those things may offer insight and can be supportive, but they don't replace self-authority. A grounded person lives in their body, not just in their mind or in their spiritual ideas. Being grounded means being connected to sensations. Instead of floating above your life in fantasy world, right? You're rooted in your body. And a grounded person has real world foundations. They have healthy relationships, routines, sleep, nutrition, boundaries, consistency, commitments. Your spiritual life should support your human life. That's why spirituality and religion and whatnot can be so beautiful. It's meant to support your human life. It's not meant to pull you out of your human life. And it doesn't mean you have to be perfect, right? We're human. We're here to learn. We're here to grow. There's room for error. And also, a grounded person can integrate spiritual experiences rather than chase them. Grounded people don't seek constant highs, breakthroughs, or mystical moments. They're able to take an insight and bring it into their behavior, their communication, and their daily choices. So let's just talk about ways to help you stay grounded, especially when you're starting a spiritual journey or beginning an awakening, is to stay connected with the people who reflect reality back to you. You know, having those relationships in your life, not isolating yourself. Because this is the thing with awakenings, a lot of people isolate themselves. They put themselves in echo chambers with people that just reflect their own delusional sense of reality back to them, which can be very dangerous. So one way to really help you stay grounded is to keep those friendships and relationships in your life, people who genuinely love you. It doesn't need to be a whole lot of people, right? It could be your parents, it could be a friend, a sister, a brother, whoever it may be, but not just people who reinforce your same beliefs, your same spiritual narratives, or the same echo chamber you're already in, as I just said. Having stable, healthy relationships keeps you anchored. They help you stay oriented to what is real. They offer perspective, accountability, and emotional regulation that you cannot access in isolation. And isolation is rampant in the New Age. We see it with Ella's story. I see it with a lot of people who dive deeply into New Age, people who go through these awakenings. I understand why. I've been there, because all of a sudden you're seeing things and your perception of the world shifts and you feel lonely because nobody else sees it the same way you do. Or maybe other people make you feel crazy, which is why you don't need to have a huge, large group. But it is important, okay, not to completely isolate yourself. People end up detaching from community, from family, from grounded relationships, and surround themselves only with others who think the same way. Or worse, they isolate entirely. That is so dangerous, you guys, especially when you are going through an awakening. And it's making me a little emotional feeling into this. Like, I have full body chills. It can be very dangerous, because what it does is it doesn't create groundedness. That creates more distortion. It amplifies unhealed wounds. It amplifies spiritual ego and delusion, right? Because there's no external reference point. So being grounded is not meditating for hours a day. It's not just only doing grounding practices. It's not living in an online spiritual bubble. It's not avoiding the 3D world or relying solely on nature crystals or rituals, okay? Being grounded is the ability to be present, related, relational, self-aware, and functional in real, everyday, goddamn life. It's the ability to hold a spiritual awakening and stay connected to your body, your responsibilities, and your relationships. Spirituality that disconnects you from the world isn't spirituality, it's escape, as I've mentioned earlier. And grounding is the medicine to that escape, but genuine grounding, not only grounding practices. But again, people use this language in New Age community, but don't fully understand what the language really means. I see a lot of people think they are doing these things. They think they're grounding. They think they're grounded, right? They think they're integrating. And this is not to shame them. It's just to bring awareness to this when in reality, they're not. I've been there. I get it. Again, I'm not shaming anyone, not blaming anyone. Sometimes we do need to pull back. And this is something else, right? There's a difference between isolation and needing to go inwards and pull back a little bit. Sometimes we do need to pull away. I'm not saying you need to hold on to things that are not serving you anymore. That's often a part of healing and growth. However, there is a difference between that and totally isolating and blocking out people who care for you and people who can help keep you grounded. Okay, so this segues into my next topic of conversation. There's a few times throughout her testimony where Ella mentions how these spirits were telling her to stay away from her mom. So I'm just going to show you a couple clips here.
He's just like, I'm worried about you. Like, I want to help you. And immediately I'm like, I see my angel. It sounds like I'm crazy, but like, I'm a very sane person. This was a real experience of seeing this. And this angel just looks at me and is like, get rid of her. So I'm like, you need to get out of my apartment. And I pretty much cut her off for like 6 months. She was always in my life, but I very much have my walls up. One thing also I want to share in the ayahuasca journey is, again, they said, stay away from your mom. She's not going to support this. And it's crazy because I look at my mom now and she loves me more purely than anyone I know. To this day, if I smell Palo Santo, my body goes into fight or flight because of that night. One thing she did show me, and this was the Bible, and she said, stay away from the Bible. It's not pure. She goes, I'm your God now.
So there's a few things that I want to speak to here. First of all, no loving spirit guide, angel will ever instruct you to isolate yourself from the very relationships that ground you, support you, or keep you connected to real life. That won't happen. Loving guidance does not divide you from your foundation. It will help you support it, strengthen it. And again, from my own lens, I don't believe that the spirits she was experiencing were real external beings. Okay, I'm not saying she's crazy. My belief is that they were fragments of her own psyche, parts of her ego, maybe parts of her ego that created some sort of consciousness from within herself, parts of herself, her ego that she was externalizing in order to make sense of these internal voices, fears, and unmet needs. And some of you might be like, well, Brittany, she said she was seeing these things. Again, the psyche is able to take these voices and will create a vision with it so that you have something to go off of, right? And it often will externalize it from self when really it is actually a part of the self. And to me, again, based on her story, and this is not shaming her, she sounds very ungrounded, very disconnected from herself. And when someone is ungrounded and emotionally overloaded, which she was, it becomes very easy to mistake inner turbulence for something other. That is where true grounding becomes essential, because no loving spirit, no intuitive message, no authentic inner guidance will ever tell you to isolate yourself. Isolation is the voice of fear, and fear is not that of love. Fear is rooted in ego, right? Fear is not rooted in love. I believe love is your soul, your heart. Fear is ego. We need fear sometimes for this reality. It's not all bad, but isolation is the voice of fear, not the voice of love. But now regarding the ayahuasca, this is a whole other layer, and this is also important to speak to. So personally, I've sat with ayahuasca 11 times. Now, that might sound like a lot to some of you. And for some people it is a lot, but really I'm still a baby in this world. You know, there's people who have sat with the medicine hundreds of times. It's not for everybody. It's absolutely not for everybody. For some people, they sit with it once and that's it. For me, in my path, I've been led to it quite a few times now, and I know I'm meant to sit with it more. That's my path. Nobody's path should look like the other. So I do want to make that very clear. With that said, even though I've sat with it 11 times, which really is not a lot in the big scheme of things, I don't pretend to fully understand the depths of this medicine. It is profound, it is beautiful, and it is extremely intense. It is really hard to put to words, but it is extremely intense, and it should never be taken lightly. Okay, and this is where context matters, because ayahuasca is not safe for someone who is emotionally unstable. It is not safe for somebody who is ungrounded or actively unraveling. Okay, and again, based on her story, she sounds quite unstable and quite ungrounded, and this is not to shame her, but based on everything that she's experienced, right, this constant seeking externally, high, these emotional highs, all of this crying, all of this dysregulation from within. To me, she does not sound grounded. She does not sound stable. That's why responsible centers, and I don't know where she sat with the medicine or what the screening process was, so I'm not trying to talk poorly about the center she sat with. However, responsible centers have screenings. They ask about mental health, emotional stability, medications, suicidal thoughts, because there are absolutely cases where the safest answer is no, you should not sit with the medicine. And of course, even with screenings, people will slip through the cracks. But based on her story, the isolation, the obsession, these addictions that she's having, the unstable emotional landscape that she's describing, in my opinion, she was not in a grounded enough state to be sitting with the medicine. That alone can shape the entire trajectory of a ceremony. And here's what most people don't understand. Ayahuasca does not always show you the truth. Ayahuasca does not always show you the truth. It's not always literal. Sometimes it shows you your deepest fears. It shows you your distortions. It will mirror the very pattern that is harming you. Sometimes it exaggerates a wound so you can finally see it clearly. Again, it's intense. It's hard to put to words unless you've experienced it. And this is just with plant medicine in general, not just ayahuasca. You cannot take every message literally. And I've learned this the hard way. I'm telling you that right now. You cannot take every message literally. With plant medicine in general, plant medicine speaks in symbolism, it speaks in metaphors. It often does not speak in clean or linear instruction. And integration often takes years before the meaning becomes clear. Sometimes you could have a journey and be like, what the F was that? And you don't really get clarity until years later. Okay, so that's also something really important to note here, because in her case, the messages of stay away from your mom, stay away from the Bible, and then this third one, that she speaks to me, they don't read as truth. To me, they read as a lesson in power, because she was constantly giving her power away to these outside sources, to the tarot cards, to these readers, to this, to that, right? To me, it reads like the medicine saying, you keep giving your power away to anything outside of yourself. You're giving your power away to everything outside of yourself. And this is what it looks like when you hand your power over to the wrong things. Because what was she doing? Consistently handing her power away to the wrong things. And ayahuasca is no fucking joke. Excuse my language. It is no joke. It will bring to light what you're doing, and not often in a nice, cozy way. Not often in a way that makes sense right away. It's intense, and it was intense for her. But to me, it screams, okay, you keep giving your power away, keep giving your power away to these things, seeking outside of yourself. That was the energy I believe she was going into the ayahuasca ceremony with. So that was the mirrored lesson, and that's not an easy one. Because all of these things, stay away from your mom, it's like sometimes the medicine acts as like a massive wake up call. Come on, snap out of it moment, right? Like snap out of it. We're going to put this in your face so intense, and this is so obviously not true. Snap out of it. Is kind of like what I'm hearing from her whole experience, right? A mirror of what happens when you're disconnected from your own center, your own discernment, your own inner voice, and your own internal grounding. A mirror of how easily fear can disguise itself as guidance when you're unstable. A mirror of the exact pattern that she had been repeating, looking outward for answers instead of inward for truth. And I've seen this before. A close friend of mine actually had a similar thing happen. She went to ayahuasca, and the medicine told her 3 things that were absolutely not true. And she believed them at first. But after deeper integration, she realized that medicine wasn't showing her truth. It was showing her the exact thing that she needed to see so she could finally reclaim her power. Because that is the point. Ayahuasca doesn't just show you the light. It shows you the places where you abandon yourself, not to punish you, but to help heal the patterns that are keeping you stuck. And that's the deeper layer I see here. And again, I don't even think she should have sat with the medicine based on where she was. But again, that's just my opinion, I will say. But this brings me to something else, talking about giving your power away. Something else that I want to bring light to is on the theme of giving your power away. She keeps talking about, oh, the spirits told me to do this, or the angels told me to do this. Again, these outside sources are telling me to do things. If these outside sources are actually a piece of your psyche, fragmented, right, that you perceive as outside of you, because these unintegrated parts of self have been created from the ego, they are dark energies. They're not gonna lead you to where your heart is actually trying to guide you. If you continue to give your autonomy away to these parts that are outside of you, that's not healthy. You need to learn how to cultivate that relationship with yourself so that you can actually listen to your heart. So that when you receive guidance, you can use your discernment like, oh, this guidance, yeah, that feels good for me. That feels in alignment, or no, that feels off. There's something with that doesn't feel right. This is where discernment is so important, because it sounds like her ego, these fragmented parts of herself, were in the driver's seat the whole time. She thought that she was following her guides and angels, but what she was doing was handing her power over away to the devil within her, to the ego within her. She frames it as these outside demons that have infiltrated her, when I see it as internal parts that are yet to be integrated, and that can be really dangerous. And a lot of people are living life that way, living life through the lens of the ego subconsciously. You don't need to always listen to what spirit tells you to do, what angels tell you to do. And this is something that I had to learn on my path too. It's like, what does Brittany want to do? What do I want to do? I don't need to always listen to these outside sources. And that was a part of a lesson for me. Spirit will guide you and support you, but they want you to trust yourself and your inner guidance, because we all have a soul that's connected to our higher wisdom. We all have that source within us that's connected to God, but it comes from within us. And the key is connecting to that part within us to receive that guidance. It's not always external. Yes, you can receive real guidance from external sources. I'm not saying you can't, right? But this is again where discernment is necessary, and it's important not to constantly give your power away to these outside things. Okay, I'm going to show another clip here.
And I blow rapé up each nose 2 rounds every day. Like, if you guys don't know, it looks like you're doing drugs, like you're blowing powder up your nose, and you have this spiritual high. And I would then connect with these spirits and ask them what they wanted me to do today, and they would tell me what to do. So I think I'm in this like mystical world.
So I want to pause here and talk briefly about rapé, because the way she described it in her video feels dismissive to me, and it just honestly feels misinformed. She said it looks like drugs, right? You're blowing powder up your nose. And I do understand that from the outside, this practice can look strange, right? If you don't understand it. But that framing erases the cultural, spiritual, and ceremonial roots of this medicine, because rapé is sacred medicine. It's a sacred Amazonian snuff made from finely ground tobacco and various medicinal plants. It has been used by indigenous tribes for generations as a tool for grounding, clearing the mind, sharpening intention, opening prayer, and purifying emotional integrity. It's traditionally administered ceremonially, often by a trained facilitator or a member of the community who understands the energetic implications.
You can drink out, sister.
It's
It's meant to be done with intention. It's not meant to be used as a quick high or something that you use impulsively. So I just wanted to speak to that because I think that that's important. She also shared that she was using rapé twice a day, every day for a period of time, specifically to reach for that mystical high, right? To connect to these spirits that would then tell her what to do. That right there is a huge red flag, not because rapé is inherently bad, okay, or dangerous, but because rapé is not meant to be used compulsively. To use it to chase these visions or mystical experiences is a distortion of the practice. These medicines are not meant to override your intuition, numb emotional pain, or replace inner guidance. Taking it twice a day is excessive and destabilizing. Any tool, even one meant for grounding, because a lot of people use rapé and it can be very grounding for people, but even one used for grounding becomes dysregulating when used as an escape, right? Again, the pattern, using something as a escapism, right? There's avoidance here. And this pattern mirrors everything else that she's shared, right? An addictive relationship with spirituality, or with something, an addictive relationship with something outside of herself, a compulsive need to feel something, a reliance on outside sources instead of cultivating that inner stability. So again, rapé is not the problem. The problem was the intention and the frequency and the lack of grounding and the emotional state she was in while using it. And when you approach any spiritual tool from a place of instability, any spiritual tool, okay, from a place of instability, from a place of isolation, from a place of avoidance, the tool then becomes another way to bypass bypass yourself. So this brings me to my next point that I want to speak to. I'm just going to show a clip here.
I do a rapé ceremony and the spirit comes to me and tells me you need to move to Bali. And I'm like, okay, another move. I'm like, okay, if that's what you say. So this is when things started to get really intense. Now, one thing I also want to say, I completely forgot to say, is one thing ayahuasca told me was to get a serpent tattoo on me to integrate the codes.
You hear this a lot through her testimony. Spirit told me this, spirit told me that, right? To me, this actually mirrors something that I see often in unstable spiritual awakenings. People mistake internal fragmentation for external guidance, which I've already mentioned. Real spiritual guidance exists. There are real spirit allies, real intuition, real protection. Discernment is everything, and discernment only comes when you're grounded, regulated, and actually connected to yourself. People often project these inner parts outward and label them as angels, spirit guides, or universal messages. The tricky thing is it really does feel external. Like it really does feel like it's something outside of you. Again, I get it. I've been there. I've experienced this. And this is why you'll hear her saying things like, Spirit told me to go to Bali, right? Ayahuasca told me to get the codes or the tattoos for codes. My angel told me to cut my mom out of my life. These aren't messages from a loving guide. This is someone being flooded by their own subconscious material and labeling it as something divine or something outside of themselves. Real spiritual guidance never overrides your free will. Real spiritual guidance will never tell you what to do. That's why we have free will here. It's up to you at the end of the day, right? It's like a teacher. They'll give you guidance, right? To help lead you to maybe your most fulfilling path, but they will never override your free will. Real guidance doesn't isolate you from your support systems. Real guidance will never feed you fear or urgency or impulsivity. That's all ego-based. That's ego, right? Fear, urgent, impulsive. Loving guidance is subtle, supportive, and gentle. It nudges you inward. It strengthens your connection to yourself. What she was describing is just another version of herself giving her power away. Instead of trusting her own inner authority, she outsourced her choices to whatever voice or sensation she felt in that moment. And because she was using repe excessively, which again is a sacred medicine, not something to be used twice a day, it amplified what was already unresolved inside of her. Any plant medicine will do this. So I'm going to show another clip here. Okay. So this is after she's turned to Jesus.
I was meditating on the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit told me that I needed to share my entire story from the very beginning.
Okay. So this is now after the New Age framework, right? She's now in her new Jesus framework. And she says, I meditated on the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit told me that I need to tell my entire story. So what this reveals to me, and I'm saying this gently, is that even within her new Jesus framework, the same underlying pattern is still present. She's outsourcing her internal authority to something outside of herself. The language has changed. The mechanism hasn't. Before it was spirit guides told me, angels told me. Now it's the Holy Spirit told me. It's the same structure. It's just dressed in different language. And this is important because when somebody hasn't actually healed the core wound, the instability, lack of inner grounding, the fear of trusting themselves, they don't suddenly stop outsourcing their power just because they switch spiritual frameworks. They simply transfer that outsourcing from one system to another. To me, it looks like there hasn't been a meaningful internal shift yet. The external belief has changed, but the internal pattern, in my opinion, is currently the same. True transformation wouldn't be about replacing New Age spirits with Christian spirits. It would look like developing internal discernment, stability, emotional regulation, and the ability to sit with oneself without needing an external voice to dictate what to do. Because genuine spiritual maturity doesn't rely on something outside of me told me what to do. It sounds more like I'm listening to my intuition. I'm listening to my inner voice. I'm taking responsibility. I'm choosing this from a grounded and regulated place. What's happening instead is a continuation of the same cycle. Outsourcing, right? Outsourcing intuition, decision-making, self-trust, just through a different lens, through a different framework. This doesn't make her wrong or bad, and I'm not judging her for it. The nervous system wants stability. It wants safety. The ego wants certainty. When somebody hasn't yet cultivated that stable internal foundation, it's easy to replace one authority with another rather than becoming one's own authority. That's why even now with her new devotion to Jesus, the pattern's still showing the reliance on external voices, the lack of inner grounding, and the continual seeking of direction from something above rather than something within. And I want to acknowledge that many Christians do hold the belief that Jesus is your source of guidance, and that you are meant to seek the answers from above rather than relying on your own inner knowing. So I'm going to put a pin in that because I'm going to circle back to that. Okay, you guys, change of scenery. Well, not really, same scenery, just different time of day. I had to take a little break. I went outside, I went for a walk, I had a little snack, I made myself a nice little warm drink. I actually made some cacao. Look at how cute this mug is, you guys. Anyway, so I hope that you have a nice warm drink. Let's dive right back in. I want to show you guys this clip.
And this is when I started to experience a lot of spiritual attacks, is the only way I can describe it. Like I said earlier, I opened myself up to a lot of these spirits. So I go to the Canary Islands and I start experiencing like what I now know is demonic oppression. And I just start getting these spirits like telling me to kill myself, to tell me to like that I'm just worthless, that I'm depressed.
Okay, so first I want to acknowledge like how real this is for her. You can see that she's getting emotional. So I want to acknowledge that. And I want to dive more into this, but first I'm going to show one more clip.
Because I was experiencing what I now know is demonic attacks because of everything that I was opening myself up to, I just thought like all of that demonic oppression was me. So every time I was getting bombarded with demonic thoughts, telling me to kill myself, telling me like I'm the worst person in the world, I need to leave this world, like all this stuff, I kept thinking like, oh wow, this is how bad of a state I'm in. Like I have so much healing to do. And I'm starting to feel more and more terrified of myself because I'm having these spirits come to me and tell me things, and I don't know how to share this with a normal person because they wouldn't understand.
So she uses a lot of these words, right? Demonic oppression, demonic attacks, and she was hearing dark thoughts, these spirits telling her she shouldn't live anymore, all of these things. She now, with her new framework, interpreted this as proof that she opened doors that she shouldn't have opened. However, at the time, she thought that something was deeply wrong with her. She thought, wow, I must be in such a bad state. I have so much healing to do, right? And she became afraid of her own mind. And this is something that I really want to highlight, you guys. When someone is experiencing suicidal ideation, intrusive thoughts, or what feels like an internal attack, this is not a spiritual initiation. This is a sign that your nervous system is overloaded, it's overwhelmed, it's dysregulated, and it is absolutely a moment where you need to go seek external help. Go seek real world help. She mentioned that she didn't tell anybody because she felt like she couldn't tell anyone because she felt people would think she was crazy. If you are experiencing any of this, do not shame yourself, but absolutely that is the time to go get help because it can become very dangerous. In her testimony, you know, she talks about this twin flame, this guy who thought she was her twin flame, and he ended up unaliving himself, which is really sad. Like that is really sad. And based on her description of him, he was also very unstable. She knew he was good deep down, right? But he ended up unaliving himself, and she perceived that to be these demons that ended up getting to him, right? Regardless, if you are experiencing any of this, you guys, it can lead to a very dark and scary place. Go get help. It is nothing to be ashamed of. And it's important when you reach out for help, it's not somebody who's just going to echo back to you your own beliefs, right? Not somebody within your echo chamber, but somebody grounded, somebody who cares about you, okay? Somebody you can trust, please. Or a professional. If there's nobody in your life that you know that you can go to, go find a professional that you trust. You don't have to carry it alone. You're not meant to carry it alone. Because here's the thing, people who are ungrounded, emotionally fragile, isolated, can misinterpret internal psychological distress as external spiritual forces. And that can become devastating. It often will feel like something outside of you because your system is in fight or flight. Your perception is altered and your sense of self becomes fragmented. And without grounding or support, it can be terrifying and it can have devastating results. So when she's saying, you know, she was under demonic attack, it's important to explore whether what was happening was actually a spiritual threat or an internal system collapse being misinterpreted through a spiritual lens. And that distinction matters, not to invalidate her experience, but to offer a different perspective, right? And again, I want to make this very clear, okay? If you are hearing voices telling you to harm yourself, and you feel terrified of your own mind, or if you feel disconnected from reality, please go get help. Go tell somebody. Go reach out. This is not something that you have to navigate alone. This is not something you should be navigating alone. And there is absolutely no shame in going to ask for help. There is a mental health crisis in the world right now. We are more disconnected from ourselves than we've ever been before, and a lot of people deal with mental health, okay? It's really scary up there for a lot of people. And this is the fault of no one. It's a direct result of the world that we live in. We have been raised in a society where we have been programmed to ignore our inner voice, our inner compass. Therefore, a lot of people are disconnected. A lot of people are seeking externally. They're looking for things outside of themselves. A lot of people are in a dark place mentally. It's nothing to be ashamed of. And many people are going through awakenings right now. And this is, I want to say, the dark side to an awakening. Not that an awakening is dark, but if you are unstable and you are unregulated, it can become very dangerous. Okay, so I want to circle back to what I was talking about earlier, acknowledging that many Christians hold the belief that Jesus is your source of guidance. You should be seeking guidance outside of you, and that you should be seeking answers from above instead of looking inward. If you look at the biblical framing, God is often referred to as the Father. And if you think about it, any healthy parent-child relationship, the goal is not for the child to remain dependent on the parent forever. A good parent doesn't want their child to lose all inner autonomy. A good parent doesn't want their child to collapse their discernment, their own inner discernment. A good parent doesn't want their child constantly outsourcing every decision they make. A good parent wants their child to grow. A good parent wants their child to develop wisdom, to be able to trust themselves, right? So that they can navigate through the world without having to rely on anything outside of them. Yes, turning to God, turning to Jesus, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that you shouldn't. The guidance that you receive can absolutely be beautiful. It absolutely can be supportive. And yes, for many people, it does bring peace. It brings clarity, it brings comfort, and those are all beautiful things. But relying exclusively on external guidance, even if you call that guidance Jesus, removes your own agency, where you don't learn how to feel your own inner guidance, your own inner truth. You don't learn what your own yes or no is, what your own intuition is, and how to connect to that voice within you. That's not empowerment, that's spiritual dependence. And this is not me saying we are all our own gods, right? Because this is the thing with New Age too. People speak to, you have God within you. I believe that we have God within us too. I believe we all have God within us. I believe that God is in everything, but I also believe the devil is in everything. And it doesn't necessarily mean only worshiping yourself, but it's honoring yourself. Absolutely honor the divinity that resides within you, because divinity resides within you, and absolutely you should honor that. But this is not me saying that we are gods alone. God resides within us, but so does the devil, so does the ego. And that's where your free will comes into play. That's where your choice comes into play, because every single day you have a choice. Am I going to make decisions based on the voice of God within me, or based on the voice of the devil within me, the ego within me? Because we are all one at the end of the day. We are all connected. We are all of God, of source. So we all have a piece of that within us. And it's not only within us, it's also outside of us. But in order to connect to that wisdom, it's tuning into that voice that does reside within you. And it's important to learn the difference between the angel, the devil, the ego, the intuition, whatever language you want to use. It takes time and dedication and self-devotion to really learn how to differentiate between those voices. Okay, so this is not me saying that we are all our own gods, because I know that that is a point of tension between Christianity and New Age teachings, right? But what I am saying is we all have divine intelligence within us. That same breath of life that God breathed into humanity, some call it the Holy Spirit, it resides within us. However, in order to have this human experience, as I keep mentioning, we need that contrast. Therefore, we all have the shadow within us too. Ego, the fear, the parts of us that self-sabotage. Tuning into that inner voice is not worshiping of self. This is the understanding that human beings carry both light and darkness inside. And the role of a spiritual relationship with Jesus, with God, with your angels, with whatever language, that you want to use, is to help you grow, not to replace your ability to think, discern, or act. True guidance doesn't erase your autonomy. True guidance helps you develop it. I'm going to show you another clip.
You can rebuke anything in the name of Jesus Christ, meaning repent. Repent or rebuke is to cast out. And the therapy I used to do was let's talk to the entity, and then the entity comes to you, and it's basically just a wounded aspect of you. No, you should not be communing with these entities. You need to cast them out. They're just tricking you and making you think it's a wound of yours or a fear of yours or a block of yours, and that it's yours to keep you in this never-ending cycle of trying to integrate them. You should not be integrating it. God brought me through 7 days of deliverance. No one put this on me. This was an experience I had with God before I understood what was happening. I didn't know what the Holy Spirit was. I didn't know Jesus could cast out demons. I didn't know what deliverance was. I didn't know what conviction meant. I didn't know know what all these things meant. I experienced them before I found the word to the experience, which I'm so grateful for. Essentially, to this day, my mind has been washed clean. My body, my heart has been washed clean because I have not had a similar thought of the way I used to think since the day this all started.
Hey guys, don't mind the outfit change. It is a completely new day. I didn't get to fully articulate everything that I wanted to articulate the other night. It was just a long day. So I was like, do you know what? I'll just film again today. Anyways, she talks about how she went through 7 days of deliverance and Jesus cast out all of these demons and her mind was washed clean. And a lot of people who go from New Age to Jesus speak about this similar experience and use the words such as casting out demons, my mind was washed clean. And I'm not trying to discredit that experience. I'm not saying that that experience is not possible. What I do want to speak to, though, is the symbolism behind it, because in her case, she was starting to realize that she herself was really in a dark energy on the New Age path. And she was getting curious about Jesus. Jesus was starting to appear to her through different people, and she started welcoming, asking Jesus to come in. So when this shift happened, it makes sense that the language and the symbolism is going to be under the Jesus umbrella. Going back to what I was saying at the beginning of the video, I believe that God communicates to us in whatever language is most comfortable to us at this time. Ella was going through a huge shift. She started to become aware of all of the darkness that she was dabbling in New Age. Therefore, if the energy or the symbolism or the language that were to come through was a New Age language or lens, she would reject it because to her, New Age is now unsafe. It's dark. It's demonic. But with her new Jesus framework, that feels more safe. So, of course, the language and the symbolism used is going to be Jesus language and Jesus symbolism because that is what is comfortable for her. Maybe she was fully washed clean and all of these demons were removed from her body. I'm not saying that experience was not true. I think she talks about deliverance, right? Like, again, the specific language. And she says something like, I didn't even know what these things were until I experienced it. And I get that because I've had the same experience with me with other things where, I didn't know what certain things were until I experienced it. And I was like, oh my gosh. I believe that you can experience similar shifts and similar cleanses being washed clean because I've experienced it myself, but not through that language. Do you know what I'm saying? Again, God communicates with you through the language that makes you feel the most comfortable. Again, she was coming out of a very chaotic time, a time where she was very unstable and she started to become very aware of the darkness that she was dabbling in. Ego leading the way, in my opinion. But we all have inner demons, and these inner demons within us that are created within us to protect a wound from within us. The more she was in New Age, she said it was getting worse and worse and worse and worse. I believe it was getting worse and worse and worse and worse, not necessarily because of New Age, but because her core wounds, she was still not receiving love where she needed to receive love. It was continual escapism, looking for the next thing, searching outside of her, instead of tending to what needed to be tended to on the inside. And I believe that her soul was finally ready for real shift, energetic shift, a timeline jump, so to speak, whatever language you want to use. And her soul was ready to let go of all of that darkness. So God, Source, communicated that with her in a way that her mind would be able to comprehend. And in a way, her mind and her system would feel safe. And that safety is now found through the lens of Jesus. She feels safe with that. That makes her feel good. So that language is going to resonate with her. But as I was saying before, being washed clean and stuff like that, I do believe that you can experience that not only through the language of Christianity and the language of Jesus, but you can experience that energetic shift and cleanse from within you in other ways as well. And again, I've experienced this firsthand. It's like all of a sudden you're ready to shift and something like clicks within you. And that shift happens and you release what's no longer in alignment with you. Not through the lens of Jesus though, through language that I understood at the time, that made sense to me at the time. And again, I believe God will communicate with you in a way that feels safe to your system. and in a way that you understand. And for a lot of people, that is Jesus. And some of you might be like, well, what do you mean, Brittany? She didn't even know what those words meant ahead of time. So how is it being brought to her through the language that makes her safe if she doesn't even know what those words mean yet? Spirit is so smart, God is so smart, that they will communicate with you with the language that will feel safe to you, even if in that moment you don't yet know what those words mean yet. You know what I'm saying? Spirit knew, God knows that she is now walking on this path of Jesus, which is beautiful. Therefore, the language that they're going to bring through is going to be under the umbrella of Jesus, even if in that moment she doesn't yet know what that language means yet. Spirit is the most intelligent thing. Source God is the most intelligent thing in the universe, right? So intelligent. Source knows what is going to feel good for you now and down the line, even if in this moment you don't yet know what these words mean. And she was already moving, she was already shifting from New Age to Jesus. Therefore, Spirit is going to use language that will feel safe and secure for her, because that is what she needs. And it feels like she does need to walk this path of Jesus. It feels like this is where her soul is leading her. Therefore, the language that Spirit is going to bring through is going to be under the umbrella of Jesus or Christianity, whatever. That's how smart Spirit is. Jesus is an amazing bridge. He is an amazing bridge. And I think he is somebody to look up to. I do believe that we absolutely should follow in his footsteps. Absolutely. I'm not denying any of those things. He was conceived of pure, unconditional love. And he came down here to show us the way. Follow me, walk in my footsteps, do what I do, live life this way. And he unlocked Christ consciousness from within him. Because again, Christ is not Jesus' last name, right? Christ is Christ consciousness, and it is something that he awakened from within him, that we too have the ability to awaken from within ourselves. It's a level of consciousness that rises within you. Christ has risen. Christ consciousness within each and every one of us has the ability to rise. Jesus was a human. Some people believe he was God. I mean, he was born of the Virgin Mary, but he was human. He came down here to be human in this human form, to show us, to teach us, to guide us, and he showed us how to awaken Christ consciousness from within. And we all have the power to do the same. But in order to do that, we have to walk in his shoes and his footsteps. He is an example, and he is a beautiful bridge for many people. But I personally don't necessarily believe he is the one who saves us. Jesus was not religious. He didn't want us worshiping him. And interestingly enough, something else I want to point out here, we know that Jesus' name was actually Yeshua or Yeshua. I don't know exactly which one is the correct pronunciation, but Yeshua. And we also know that Jesus was not actually a white man. That has been proven. We know this. And it's interesting because one of the rules of the Christian faith is not to idolize false gods. And it's interesting to me because Jesus is depicted as this white man named Jesus, which is not the actual truth of who he is. The image that is portrayed in society symbolizes the distortion of his teachings. Sorry, not that his teachings were distorted, but how we as humans have distorted his teachings. His image in and of itself is distorted. In my opinion, a lot of people are unknowingly worshiping a false god. And that's why I say the devil has his roots not only in New Age, but in Christianity as well. And it's right in your damn face. Are you willing to see it? And some people might be like, oh, Brittany, Jesus doesn't care. Jesus doesn't care if he's depicted the wrong way. He loves us anyways, and all he cares is that you follow him. I don't necessarily think that God or Jesus cares anyway. Like, I agree. I don't necessarily think they care. However, I think it's important to look at. You can't ignore that. Truth is in plain sight. People say New Age is all demonic. The devil has its roots in New Age. Definitely the devil does, but the devil definitely has its roots in religion as well. And a prime example that's right in your face is the depiction of Jesus, because that depiction is a lie. It is false. It is not truth. And I believe that that is a symbol for how we have distorted the truth of his teachings. And I'm curious to uncover the actual truth. Like, I'm curious about Jesus. I think Jesus, again, I have the highest respect for Jesus. Thank you. Thank you for coming, for loving us so much that you chose to come down here to show us the way during a time where many were unable to receive him and his word because people were unable to hear what he was actually trying to say. They were unable to see, to hear, to listen because their ego, their inner devil, right? Because I believe that ego is an extension of the devil, got in the way. And because Jesus was so much of a light, we killed him. Jesus died because of our ego and the inability to see the light that he was. Jesus, I believe, does not want to be worshipped. I believe that if he were here, he would be flipping tables. If he found out people were outsourcing their power to him, yes, follow him, look up to him, thank him, honor him, respect him, hold him up high. I'm not saying you shouldn't do any of that. But to completely outsource your power, I believe Jesus would flip tables, as he did when he was here in the past. That's all in the Bible for other reasons, right? Especially a whitewashed version of him. Especially a whitewashed version of him if Jesus were here and he were to see. I'm even just thinking about Christmas. Like, Christmas just passed. If people... Sorry, I can't help but laugh. If he were to see how people gather and worship this image of Jesus Christ, this white man, he would literally be like, what the fuck? Like, he would literally be like, wait, that's not even me. And you're worshiping this false god, this false idol. Did you not hear what I said? Did you not hear what I said? What was the point of me even coming down here and sacrificing myself for you to not even hear what I said? And I'm not saying he came down here for no reason. Obviously, he came down here for a huge reason, right? I'm just getting riled up right now. But think about it. Like, if you think about it critically, his name's not Jesus. He's not a white man. If he were to come down here and see us worshiping this white God that we've created and named Jesus, he would literally be like, what the fuck? What the fuck? Like, it's funny if you think about it. It's humorous because it's like blasphemy. It's literally like blasphemy. Also, not to mention, since we're getting into this, and sorry, it's editing Brittany here, obviously. Since we're getting into this, not to mention the amount of horror, devastation, deaths, the list goes on, that has occurred on this earth in the name of Jesus Christ. I have full body chills right now. The amount of horror, regardless of religion, the amount of horror, death, abuse that has happened on this earth in the name of Jesus Christ. That is not the workings of Jesus Christ, my friend. That is the workings of the devil. And I don't even think I need to list out the horrors that have transpired on this earth in the name of Jesus Christ. If you don't know, go search it up, because that's a whole conversation for another day. There's so many different things. But the amount of evil that has transpired on this earth in the name of Jesus Christ. Jesus, if he were to be here right now and he were to see this image of him that's not even real, he would say, my friends, do you not see how obvious this is? This symbol that you say is me is false. That is symbolizing the level of distortion that you have taken my word, if that's making sense, and skewed, right? I'm not saying Jesus is bad or anything like that. I believe Jesus was real, as I said, and I believe he was an incredible being. Again, thank you. But the amount of horror that has occurred in the name of Jesus Christ, and this kind of just ties into what I've been saying before. It doesn't matter what path you walk. And I feel like a lot of people who walk the path of Jesus have this righteous attitude, often, not all, okay, not all, but there's almost like this nose up, like I know better. And as I keep saying, it's not the path you walk, it is the level of awareness you bring onto that path, because the path that is Jesus, there's a lot of beauty, but there's a lot of fucking darkness as well. And it's the same for the New Age community. I see a lot of people in New Age, they also think they know better than. It's like two mirrors looking at each other. It's like when we realize that we have different language for different things, and we're probably not nearly as evolved as we think we are. If you're someone who thinks you're highly evolved, and you think you know all the answers, you think for sure Jesus is the path, or you think for sure New Age is the path, you're probably not nearly as evolved as you think. And I'm not saying I know either, because I feel like I don't know. I'm just sharing my opinion, how I don't think anything is black and white. I don't think neither path is the way or the only way. I think that's small-minded to think that way. I think, who the hell are we to know, right? Anyways, I'm going on another tangent. Back to the video. But Jesus doesn't want us to worship him. He wants us to follow him, to follow in his footsteps, to practice his teachings, to integrate his teachings, to become sovereign ourselves. And I think that a lot of his teachings have become very, very distorted. Anyways, I'm going kind of on a little tangent now. I'm going on a bit of a tangent with this. I could go on and on about that too. Because it also leads, though, into bypassing. I feel like a lot of people with Jesus language, like, Jesus delivered me, he washed me clean. It completely takes away self-responsibility and self-accountability. Like, I know for me personally, when the demon was washed clean from me, and it was actually ayahuasca that made me aware of the demon within me. It took me a minute to register, some integration time to register, but eventually I came to my realization that I had a demon within me, and I did kind of cast it out. I demanded that it would leave, and I sent it back to love, and it was gone. And I did experience a shift in that time, because as soon as that happened, as soon as it was cast out of me, it never came back or anything like that. However, I believe the reason it never came back is because I then looked at the wound that created the demon in the first place. I had to take accountability for that. I had to look at that. I couldn't just bypass it. Oh, it's washed clean. It wasn't my fault that it was there. It was something outside of me that infiltrated me. That's one thing with Christianity that I really disagree with. A lot of the Christian belief is all of this stuff that you experience is not actually yours. That completely takes away accountability. You know, it's like you could kill someone and then you could say, oh, but it wasn't me, it was a demon. And then Jesus washed me clean. I had nothing to do with it. It completely takes away accountability. What about that core wound that created the demon in the first place? That absolutely is your responsibility to take care of, to give love to become aware of that wound so that inner demon is not recreated from within you, because inner demons cause harm and can inflict harm on each other. And if you have inner demons, it doesn't make you evil, it makes you human, because we all have the ego that resides within us. And as a society, we have not been taught how to differentiate between the voice of the ego and the soul. We have not been taught that. Because we feel like we're good people at the core. We don't want to take accountability. We don't want to say, oh yeah, I have darkness within me. We don't want to acknowledge that. But without acknowledging that, that's where it can get very dangerous. Personally, I know a lot of Christian people. I grew up, like I said, going to Catholic elementary school, Catholic high school. I know a lot of religious people, and some of the worst people that I know, and I'm sorry to say this, I know that this is going to trigger people, and I don't mean to, not everybody, but a lot of the Christians that I know are some of the most selfish people that I've ever met, some of the most judgmental people that I have ever met, some of the most bypassy people that I have ever met. And I realize that's not all Christians. There's some Christians that are amazing and beautiful people, but I have met people on the Christian path, and just because they follow Jesus, it doesn't mean they're all light. And I've experienced that firsthand, unfortunately. And same with New Age. Trust me, some people in the New Age are also not great people as well. And it's not because they're not good at their core, it's because they're unaware of their shadow. They're unaware of their ego. And with Christianity, I believe that people outsource their power to Jesus. Jesus saved me, Jesus washed me clean. And then they have no accountability to look at. No self-responsibility. And then patterns repeat, cycles repeat. The ego is just as big, and if anything, eventually gets bigger. What that's doing is giving them permission to bypass. It's an excuse, it's a reason to bypass, because it's a lot easier to bypass than to sit with the darkness within, to actually acknowledge and look at the distortions that are happening from within you. It's so much easier not to look at your darkness and say, oh yeah, that wasn't me, that was the darkness that infiltrated me. I am now following Jesus, and I don't actually have to look at why that happened. As humans, it's a lot easier to do that. It's an excuse to bypass. I'm not saying you shouldn't follow Jesus. I myself am a follower of Jesus. I think he is the example, one of the most amazing examples that there are. But it's not outsourcing and saying, oh, I have nothing to look at now. When you bypass, you lack awareness. And when you lack awareness, that is when the darkness can take over and will take over. So I feel like for some people, this bridge is necessary. For some people who were in New Age and were really in the darkness within New Age because their ego was running the show, right? Again, being unaware of the darkness within them, because in New Age, there's a lot of bypassing that happens as well. It's rampant in New Age. It's rampant in Christianity. It's rampant in New Age. So I'm not saying one is better than the other. Again, it's the level of awareness a person brings to that path. And in the world in general, a lot of people are unaware. A lot of people are unaware just in general. So regardless of the path, I feel a lot of people are unaware, which is why there's a lot of darkness. We see darkness in a lot of different religions, right? You can't deny it. And regardless of the path, there's a lot of darkness on different paths. And I believe it is because we all hold that darkness within us, but we live in a world where we're made to fear the darkness. We're made to suppress the darkness. We are not taught how to look at it within us, to love that part of us, to recognize that it is a necessary part of this experience, because to avoid it is to give it power. And I think that's what Christianity teaches. And with New Age talks about looking at the shadow, but I feel like a lot of these words are used, but they're misinterpreted and people don't actually understand how to look honestly at their shadow. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I am not saying I'm perfect. I understand that I have shadow parts that I am unaware of still. This is not me saying that I'm perfect. I want to make that very clear. With that said, I've been on a journey myself. I've been on a deep journey, and I question myself regularly. I look at the shadow within me, acknowledging that I have shadow and I have darkness within me, because it is what makes me human. So anyways, I went on a tangent there. But what I was saying initially, she was using all of these words, Jesus delivered me. I didn't even know what deliverance was until after it happened. You know, she said she was experienced Jesus from the inside. I believe all of that to be true. I'm not saying that that wasn't necessarily true. What I'm also saying is what she energetically experienced, I believe that you can experience under different frameworks, under different religious frameworks, right? God is just going to use the framework that feels the safest to you, that you are most comfortable with, right? And as I was saying at the beginning, different frameworks use different language. So it might not register when you hear another framework's language because the language, it sounds different, even though they're describing the same thing. So I'm not saying this didn't happen for her. What I am saying is it doesn't necessarily mean it's the one and only way. Just because it is a beautiful way for a lot of people, I personally don't believe it's the one and the only way. I believe it was the way for her, and it was exactly what her soul needed, especially because she was in a lot of darkness within the New Age. So this shift, this bridge, Jesus is the bridge that she needs, absolutely, to get to the light, to release these demons that have been within her, that are within her, right? And now that they've been released from her, because sure, I believe that now that she's aware of them, they're gone, but now is this is only the beginning, a necessary beginning. I personally fear, though, she's not going to take accountability. And not that it's for me to fear, but, you know, going back to what I was saying, I feel like a lot of people on the Christian path, they outsource and they're unwilling to actually look at the wounds that created these demons in the first place, or called in these demons in the first place. And that's what you need to look at. Sure, the demons could be gone now, but what attracted them in? What created them from within you? You can't bypass that part. Going back to the story of Moses that I think I spoke about at some point, or I speak to a little bit later, you have to look at the core wounds, because if you bypass that part, the demons are going to come back, point blank, period. First, it's the awareness of them. Then it's the integration work to make sure that they stay away, and the awareness to make sure they stay away. I always say awareness is not enough. You can be aware, but unless the inner shifts have taken place, awareness is not enough, right? It's kind of like, let's say you're a smoker. Sure, you can become aware that smoking is bad for you. You could become aware of it. But until you break the habit of smoking, nothing's going to change, right? You could know that it's poison to your body, but until you break the habit, nothing is going to change. Anyways, I do feel like Jesus is a beautiful bridge. I feel like it's a bridge that she needs. Absolutely. And I feel a lot of people that go from New Age to Jesus, that's exactly the bridge they need to start clean, to start fresh. It's not a bad thing. That's a beautiful thing if that's a part of your path. I'm not trying to discredit that at all. I'm just speaking to the nuance of it, because that's another thing that I don't agree with is people that are on the Jesus path. It's like, just because that was their experience and that was exactly what was real for them and that was exactly what was needed for them, they somehow feel like that's exactly what's needed for everybody else. And I strongly disagree with that. It's like anything else in life. Peanuts, for example, you might have a peanut allergy. Peanuts might kill you. They might kill you, right? But for me, peanuts might be a nourishing meal, or a nourishing addition to my meal. It might be a really amazing food for me. And if you were to try to push down my face and my throat, it's poison. Oh, you're eating peanuts. You're poisoning yourself. You're poisoning yourself. It's simply not true. Maybe that's true for you and it's valid for you, and I'm not taking away from that. But for me, it might actually be very nourishing. So to assume it is poison for me is ignorance, in my opinion. And I think that's why there's so much division in the world, just in general. As a society, we have such a black and white way of thinking, left versus right. You're either right or you're wrong. You either are a Jesus follower or you're working with the devil. And that causes so much more harm than good to this society. We need to start realizing that what's best for us doesn't necessarily mean it's best for everybody else. You know, going back to the tarot cards are a tool for some people. Sure, it can be a gateway to dark energy because you're using it from an egoic place and you're letting your inner demons kind of puppeteer you. That's dark, right? Communing with your inner demons, these entities that are a part of you but have created its own consciousness. It might feel outside of you and you might externalize it to make sense of it. And they want to protect you at the end of the day, so they're going to tell you what you want to hear, all of these fancy things, right? And it might be dark for you, but for other people, it doesn't necessarily mean that. It's like a knife. I could use a knife and I could chop up vegetables and chicken and whatever I want to chop up to create a nourishing meal for myself. And I used the knife as a tool to prepare a nourishing meal for myself. I could also take a knife and I could stab a person. It's not the knife in and of itself that is evil. It is the intention behind using it, the intention the person has behind using it. Are you going to use a knife to stab a person and to inflict harm on a person? Because that's using it from a place of ego, letting one of your inner demons take over? Or are you going to utilize that tool to chop and prepare a nourishing meal for yourself? So regardless of whether you are New Age or you are a Jesus follower, I urge you to stop assuming that what's right for you is right for everybody else because it's ignorant. It's ignorant. I sound very passionate right now, but as a society, we need to start coming together. Just in general, we need to start coming together. And if we hold viewpoints that are so black and white and we're unwilling to listen to each other and realize, hey, what's best for me might not be what's best for you, if we're unable to do that, we are going to remain divided as a society. That means you're a part of the problem. We need to start dabbling in the gray, and you don't have to agree with it, right? For example, if you have a peanut allergy, you might know for you personally, peanuts are poison to you. Absolutely. Stay firm in that for yourself. Stay away from the peanuts. You don't have to flip to the other side, but it's understanding, oh, okay, peanuts are poison for me, but I'm going to listen to other people's experiences with peanuts. And I'm not going to project my own experiences and my own opinions onto what they're saying. I'm going to listen with an open heart. That's what we need to do. Because when I do that, and instead of projecting my own views and opinions, right? Because that's giving an energy of, I know better. I experienced this, so this is what must be because it was true for me. Like, that's small-minded. Very small-minded in my opinion. And again, I'm not taking away from these experiences being real and true for people, but going again to the peanut allergy, to assume that it's poison for everybody is silly. So instead of projecting your beliefs and all of that on other people, it's taking a step back and realizing, do you know what? Yeah, this is what's true for me. I know it's poison for me and maybe for other people as well. And for other people who also have peanut allergies, we will probably get along well because we understand this and we see things the same way. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's also not judging another person for enjoying peanuts. And it's not just assuming that other people who enjoy peanuts, maybe there's another community of people who enjoy peanuts and use peanuts in a lot of their meals because it's genuinely nourishing for their body. If you're on this side and the other side and peanuts are poison to you, if you're judging them because you're assuming that those other people are unknowingly poisoning themselves, right? That's a false view, and that's going to keep the division, and it's simply ignorant. It's having the ability to realize, yes, it's poison for me, and I really get along with these people who it's also poison for because they get it. They've experienced it. They go through the same thing as me, so we connect. But I'm not going to project my judgment on the other group, that other community over there who loves peanuts and who uses peanuts, because do you know what? Maybe for them, it is actually very nourishing. Having the ability to recognize that two truths can be possible. We need that in general as a society. Because when we start projecting judgment onto other people, what is that? That's ego. That's the devil within you. When you start to think your way is the right way and the only way, That's ego. And it pushes more divide. And that's poison. It doesn't mean not to have boundaries for yourself. If somebody tries to offer you peanuts, right? And if they're pushing peanuts in your face, have boundaries for yourself. No, it's not good for me. I'm not saying you have to accept it in for yourself, but it's not projecting judgment onto each other. And same with the other way around, right? Let's say the community who loves peanuts, it's not projecting onto the group where it's poison for them. Do you know what I'm saying? It's accepting each other as you are and realizing that your experience is different than other people's experiences, and what's good for you might not be good for everybody else. And just because you had a bad experience with something, it doesn't mean everybody has a bad experience with something. And it's also realizing that we live in a world where we don't have all of the answers. I'm not assuming to have all of the answers, but what I'm saying is I think that we need to be more open-minded as a society. Personally, I believe that's why I hold the view that I believe. I see the darkness, I see the lightness in it, I see that all things can potentially be true. Because I see with my mind, I see the potential truths. And I'm not saying this is the right way or this is the wrong way, because I don't know what's the right way or the wrong way for you. I know what has worked for me. And maybe I'll share my story and what has worked for me. And hey, if you resonate with it, cool, amazing. And if you don't, that's okay. You don't have to. Oh, I'm going on a rampage right now, you guys. Anyways, I just wanted to touch on that because I don't feel that I really touched on that the other night. But yeah, okay, I'm going to end this here and we'll segue back into the other video.
I go through deliverance for 7 days. And what happened in those 7 days was Jesus showed me I would say roughly 70 agreements I made with the devil every day. And I know those words are strong. I'm so aware they're strong, especially when you're in New Age. You're like, well, what do you mean devil?
Hold on. I'm going to dive into this more, but I do want to talk to her making agreements with the devil. So this is something that I've come to realize on my own path and how easy it is to make an agreement with the devil. Again, Christians like to use these words that are so external, making a deal with the devil, right? Devil, this external force, when really language, it's hard to really define what devil means. I personally believe the devil is more than just this outside figure, this force that's against us. I explained that earlier. So anyways, going back to what I was saying, making a deal with the devil. Going back to what I was saying about the ego being an extension of the devil, the soul being an extension of God. What is that? There's a Bible verse coming to mind. It's like something about the vine. I am the vine and you are the branches. It's like we are the branches. We are an extension of God, right? Anyways, that was just popping into my head. But going back to the ego being an extension of the devil, if you think about it the way I think about it, just put your head in my head for a second here. You don't have to agree, but just bear with me, right? If the ego is an extension of the devil and your soul is an extension of God, both reside within you. Let's say you're going to grab your tarot cards and you're going to use these tarot cards, right? A lot of Christians look at tarot cards like they're demonic. But let's think about this for a second here. Some might say, oh, using tarot cards is making a deal with the devil, when in reality, maybe it is making a deal with the devil if you are using it from an egoic place. Because if you have the tarot cards in front of you and you're relying on it for answers, or you're trying to figure out the answers, I'm seeking something outside of me, I need to know, or what's going to happen, or whatever it may be, that's coming from a fear-based place, right? And fear is not rooted in love, right? Only love is rooted, only love is true. That's our soul, love, truth, right? That's our soul. The ego, if you think about fear, it's a lower vibration. We need it. You know, I'm not saying fear is bad, right? But we need fear here on earth. But if you're using tarot cards from a fear-based place, you're using it because you're seeking peace, because you're like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. I need some answers. So it might not seem like you're using them from a bad place, right? But really you're using them from a state of fear, which is an egoic place, which is what I say the ego is an extension of the devil. That's making a deal with the devil right there. So it is making a deal with the devil because you are using the cards from that low vibration instead of just being open, not relying on them. And I'm going to think of another example too. I'm going to give a personal example. So I used to have body image issues, comes and goes in waves, but it's something that I've dealt with for literally as long as I can remember as a result of the society we live in. And there was a point in my life where I was really convincing myself that I was working out because it was for my health. And that's what I told myself. I told myself, oh, this is for my health. That's what I convinced myself of. When in reality, when I was able to be honest with myself, I was really working out from a place of hatred for self because I did not like how I looked. I wanted to look a certain way. And from a place of fear because I was fearful of gaining a lot of weight. I was fearful of not looking the way I wanted myself to look because I based my worth on how I looked on the outside. I convinced myself it was coming from the right place, when in reality it was coming from fear of gaining weight, fear of not looking a certain way. So in those moments of choosing to work out, I was making a deal with the devil because I was acting on ego. And this goes for every single choice you make. Are you going to make choices based on ego, or are you going to make choices based on your heart and soul? That resides within you because you have the devil within you, or your ego resides within you and your soul resides within you. Does that make sense how I'm trying to explain it? And it's like, yeah, at one point she talks about making 60 to 7 deals with the devil a day. I believe her, not in the sense of this devil being an outside force trying to harm her, but this internal voice, this ego driven voice that comes from within her and making choices daily from an egoic place, which can translate to making deals with the devil. But again, it's something that comes from within you because there's, going back to my example, a sense of unworthiness. I had a core wound of lack of worth. I didn't see my worth. I based my worth on my external appearance, right? So the core wound there, not feeling worthy, manifested as me over-exercising twice a day, every day, all of these crazy diets that I would go on. And I convinced myself I was doing it for my health. So on the outside, it might have looked fine and dandy, but in reality, I was making deals with the devil, right? Sure, you can say deals with the devil, whatever language you want to use. I was acting out of ego. I was acting out of fear. So she's talking about how she made all these deals with the devil, which I agree she probably was, but it was based on decisions that she made from within herself, not these outside forces, in my opinion, trying to come at her.
I was seeing the validity, the weight of what I was actually dabbling in, thinking it was the lightest light of lights. And it was complete and utter darkness masquerading as light. And so I was shown every single day, multiple times a day, 70 a day, of every single agreement I let spirits come into my body. And I would just have to keep repenting. I was like, I repent in the name of Jesus Christ. I would see this demon fly out. The craziest thing, and I love this about Christianity, is like they believe like if you have suicidal thoughts, it's the spirit of death. Like it's not yours. It's not something you need to heal. It's something you cast out. And so at this point, I'm just like, my mind is being blown. I'm seeing hundreds of demons leave my body for an entire week. And God showed me like the state of me, in the sense that I thought I was like this soulful, loving person. But God showed me like I practically should have been vomiting blood. Like the state of my soul was so destroyed and I had no idea. And in an instant of seeing all these access points, these doors through tarot, through angels, through channeling, through ayahuasca, through all of this, the doorways it created and the damage it created, I was freed of it. Like God healed it in an instant.
And this is the point where bypassing enters the picture. She places the source of her suffering outside of herself, onto outside entities. It's the spirits have infiltrated her. It's taking off the accountability, placing it on something outside of oneself. This removes personal accountability, not because she's intentionally avoiding responsibility, but because her new framework doesn't allow her to see her own inner world as her own. Therefore, Christianity now becomes the new coping mechanism. And of course, that's going to make you feel a lot better about yourself when it's like this relief. It's like, oh my gosh, it's not actually me. I could bypass. Again, it's this bypassing of what's actually going on inside, putting it on something external. In New Age, she handed her power over to spirit guides, plant medicine, angels, repe. Now she's doing the exact same thing, just with new names, right? Jesus is now telling her what's true. The Holy Spirit is now telling her what to do. Jesus has cast out these demons. Deliverance heals everything instantly. Different language, same pattern. The same core of outsourcing her power. In my opinion, her internal compass has not strengthened. It's simply been relocated to an external authority that feels safer for her to rely on than her own psyche.
And one thing I want to add here, I want to speak to the access points that she's referring to. The tarot, the angels, the plant medicine, ayahuasca, etc. And she talks about them being access points to demonic entities. And I think this is important to speak about because I do understand how it can be a negative access point to dark energy for a lot of people. I don't necessarily disagree with that. In the world we live in, unfortunately, majority of people are disconnected from their inner voice, therefore naturally will use these tools from an egoic place, therefore them being access points to dark energy. Does that make sense? Like I feel like we live in a world where we have not been taught, as I've mentioned a few times in this video, right? We're so disconnected from our inner voice. It's easy to give our power away and to outsource our power to many things, not just things within New Age though. Look at Chat GPT. Is a huge example for this. And I know there's a lot of differing opinions on ChatGPT. I see the light in it. I also see the dark in it. But if you look at it from a neutral lens, if you are dysregulated, you can use ChatGPT and then become reliant on ChatGPT. Therefore, it is a gateway to dark energy, absolutely, but that's only because you are outsourcing your power to it. However, if you were to use ChatGPT from a place of inner discernment and not outsourcing your power, it's not going to have that same effect on you. It's the same thing with all of these tools that she's talking about within New Age. So I do understand, especially if a person has had a negative experience with it, I understand how you might think it is all dark and evil, especially because in the world we live in, a lot of people outsource their energy subconsciously because a lot of people are disconnected from their inner voice. So I can understand people in this day and age using these tools from a place that is not light, from an egoic place, therefore, opening themselves up to more darker energy, absolutely. But it is not these things in and of itself that are evil. It is the awareness of the person when using these things. And that's what's important. I believe that we need to start teaching people how to reconnect to their own voice and not to be afraid of these things because they can be beautiful tools. For me personally, plant medicine has been huge on my journey. It has been one of my greatest teachers, and I'm so grateful for certain tools that I have used that are within the New Age, whatever it is you want to call it. And even plant medicine to me is not even New Age. Plant medicine has been around before even Christianity came to be. That's a whole topic for another day. Anyways, so I do want to speak to that though, because I do understand how in this day and age, a lot of people who are unregulated, who are not connected with their inner voice, I do see how it can be dangerous for a lot of people to dabble in these things. So I do want to say that because I do see that. But if we were to teach people how to listen to themselves and then they were to use those tools, I feel like these tools can actually, oh, my little baby. I see how these tools can actually be quite supportive if used in the right manner.
And this is a lot. She's saying that she's seeing hundreds of demons, right? So if she's bringing all of this to her awareness, that she has all of this darkness from within her, that's a lot, right? To kind of process at once. It's like, whoa. Once you become aware of it, yes, you could send it back to love. Or if you want to use the language of Jesus casting it out, right? Being delivered, whatever language you want to use, that's fine. But that wound that's there still needs attention. That wound still needs attention, because if you don't give it the love that wound needs, whether you want to believe it was created from within you or you allowed a spirit in, it came in because there was a part of you that let it in, a wounded part of you. And that wounded part of you needs your attention, needs your love, needs your healing. Otherwise, you're just going to allow it back in or recreate it from within yourself in a different way. So her talking about Jesus casting out these demons and all of that, absolutely, that's going to create temporary relief because repression creates temporary stillness. Her 7 days of deliverance, this looks, to me, it sounds very similar to these extreme, how she was experiencing these extreme experiences in New Age. This feels almost like the same thing, but from a religious framework now, right? A Jesus framework, a life review, hundreds of demons coming out of her body within the span of 7 days, non-stop repenting, intense emotional release, visions that she's seeing, cognitive overwhelm. She even talked about during this day, somebody had to come over and pray over her because she was exhausted. This sounds very similar to experiences that was happening in New Age. It's the same thing, different framework. And this is consistent with a nervous system in extreme dysregulation, trauma flooding to the surface. She's making meaning of this intense activation that's happening within her. And when she's saying her mind has been washed clean, because I know a lot of people who turn to Jesus say this too. Again, none of this is exclusive to her. I want to make that clear. I'm using this as, again, a framework, right? But she talks about her mind being washed clean. She's no longer thinking the thoughts that she's used to, like poof, they're gone. This is the hallmarks of spiritual bypass, trauma-induced identity collapse, and a new belief system creating a false sense of safety. It's going to feel, you are going to feel relieved at first, right? Of course, that's going to feel relief to the nervous system when you can bypass and say, oh, this is not actually me. Oh, I can be safe. Something outside of me can save me. This is what I've been looking for. Again, it's going to feel safe. It's going to feel good for a time being. She may have believed that she did a lot of healing in New Age, but again, based on her story, it just felt like she was stuck in a cycle and no real healing integration was happening. Not that none happened at all. That's not what I'm saying, but it sounds more like a lot of mental overload, a lot of consumption, a lot of knowledge, as opposed to embodiment, and a lot of feeling emotion, as opposed to actually healing the wound. As I said before, there's a difference between feeling an emotion and letting it move through you, right? That's step one. Then it's looking at the core wound underneath and taking the time to integrate that. So I feel like a lot of the integration was missing. So this new framework now allows her to bypass, because it's easier to put it outside of herself. Oh, it wasn't me. I don't need to sit with myself and what's actually going on internally. I don't have to face my trauma. I don't have to explore why I disassociated. I don't need to question why I was so compulsive and addicted to all of these spiritual practices. She doesn't have to look at any of that. It makes it a lot easier for the ego. It's easier to believe that an external entity caused this, as opposed to sitting with, this was me. Parts of me that I never learned how to hold. And her saying, I saw them leave my body. Vision-like experiences and heightened emotional states feel literal. This is neurological, spiritual, and psychological all at once. It feels very, very real. But again, literal demons is a very specific interpretation, not necessarily the objective truth of what was going on. In my opinion, nothing was actually healed. Maybe she's become aware of all of these demons within her, right? Sure, she's become aware of all of these entities, but simply casting them out, in my opinion, is not enough, because those wounds that allowed them to come in are still there. You know, she says God healed everything instantly, but in my opinion, healing doesn't work like that. Healing requires integration, accountability, self-awareness. And I'm going to give you guys an example. I'm going to talk about the story of Moses, okay, in a second here. But healing requires responsibility, grounding. It requires inner work. It requires stability. It requires radical honesty. And it requires nervous system repair. We can't bypass the human experience. We're humans, right? We're here having a human experience with the nervous system. And if you have a dysregulated nervous system, it's important not to blame or shame yourself. It's a result of the world that we live in. However, you can't just say Jesus healed it all and cast it all out and now I have nothing to look at, right? Because that takes away from your very real human experience. I want to talk about the story of Moses for a moment here. If you're familiar with the story of Moses, Moses was, and I'm not going to get into too much detail of the whole story, but I'm going to talk about this because this, in my opinion, is important. It relates here to what I'm talking about. God told Moses to go free the Israelites, right? Because they were slaves under Pharaoh's reign. Pharaoh in Egypt, he had all of these slaves for centuries. Pharaoh, whoa, let my people go. Yeah. Pharaoh. Flashback to elementary school. Anyways, he was told to go free the Israelites, right? Because they were slaves. And that took some convincing, right? It didn't happen right away. It took convincing. God, showed his wrath. And eventually, and I'm not going to get into details of that, but eventually Pharaoh said, okay, fine. And he let the slaves go. And they thought that they were free. They were freed from this terror, this horror that they've been in, which parallels to, I'm going to use Ella's story, right? Being free from all of these demons that were within. She's like, I'm free. That part's true. Sure, that part's true. Okay, there's this energy of being freed, right? Thank God. I'm aware of all this now. I'm not stuck in this anymore, right? The Israelites were no longer slaves. I'm finally free. However, yes, while God freed them, that was only the beginning of their journey. That was simply step one. Because later they had to then follow Moses to get to the promised land, because they were promised, you're going to be freed and I'm going to bring you to the promised land. And the promised land was where they would have their freedom, where they could live their life with all of these resources. It was the promised land where there would be overflowing abundance there for them. And they thought, God freed us. I'm finally going to be free and I'm going to get to enjoy all of this abundance. But that was not the case for the Israelites, because after they were freed from centuries of being slaves, they then wandered the desert for 40 years before entering the promised land. And that was a test of faith, and that was a very tough time. They were frustrated. Why would God do this? He promised us this. He freed us, but Anyways, the point with that is, maybe you were freed. You were liberated from the chains that were on you. Now, though, you need to become the person worthy of entering the promised land. Because if they were to enter the promised land with all of that trauma still, because they were freed from the slavery, but that is still impacting them. They're still a group that was traumatized, and they had a lot that they needed to work through within themselves, to heal within themselves before they were actually able to enter the promised land. Because if they didn't take the time to do that work on themselves, to heal their trauma, they would have entered the promised land very, very traumatized still, and their wounds, their ego would have taken over, and destruction would have happened in the promised land. Yes, God freed them. That's beautiful. He has the power to do so. I'm not saying Jesus doesn't have the power to cast demons out. Maybe that's true, whatever. I'm not saying that that's not true. However, if you are just saying, I have nothing to look at now from within me, it wasn't me, it was only external forces, I'm free now I have nothing to look at, that is spiritual bypassing, religious bypassing, simply just bypassing 101. And if you do not look at oneself and the dysregulation from within and the impact of everything that has transpired in your life up until now, if you don't look at it, those demons are simply going to resurface, period. And that's what you see with the story of Moses, right? God freed them. But they didn't get to enter the promised land right away, because now they had to do the work to actually heal, to become worthy of entering the promised land. Not because they were unworthy, right? We're all worthy and God wants the best for us. However, because of their own inner work and shadow, if they would have entered the promised land with that, destruction would have happened, chaos would have happened. Instant healing without integration, accountability, self-awareness, without those things, and it feels like healing because the chaos quiets down for a minute, but the foundation still remains cracked underneath. So again, with the story of Moses, the trauma that the slaves endured when they were slaves and they were trapped and they were chained up, they're good people to the core, but as a result of centuries of slavery, they have wounds. For example, maybe they don't trust people. Maybe it's hard for them to trust others because of the wounds inflicted upon them at the hands of others. God freed them, but if they were to enter the promised land the next day, they would still be carrying the wound of not being able to trust people. And when you don't fully trust people, your ego might then try to protect you, and that protection can cause harm onto others. So if they were to enter the promised land with their wounds, that's why destruction would have happened. And that's just an example. But looking at Ella's story, for example, sure, maybe she was broken free from the chains, from the demons. However, now remains the wounds that need to be tended to. And the story of Moses is a perfect biblical example, right? They were freed. Jesus, God has the power to do so, to break the chains. However, it is then your responsibility to tend to the wounds that lie beneath. Now, I want to touch on something that she says a few times in her video. Ever since Jesus delivered her, she's been in a state of bliss. She talks about being in a state of bliss the last couple of months. She's been in a little Jesus bubble. Her mind has been washed clean and her heart has been completely transformed. And I'm not here to take away from that. If she has been feeling peace, that's beautiful, because it sounds like she went through so much chaos for a time. So I'm glad that she's experiencing some peace. For a lot of people, turning toward Jesus, turning toward any sacred path can genuinely initiate a powerful shift. So I'm not trying to take away from that. It can give them the structure, the safety, the security, and the meaning that they were previously missing. And honestly, for her, this may have been the catalyst that she needed to finally recognize that she was moving through a lot of unprocessed darkness. So I'm not saying that she's moving onto a wrong path or anything like that. This might be the exact path that she needs to walk for her. We're all on our own path. Okay, so I'm not saying that she's moving in the wrong direction here. Maybe this was the shift that was necessary for her to actually see all of the darkness that actually lies within her. And again, darkness doesn't mean evil. We all have darkness within us, okay? So this is not me condemning her relationship with Jesus or anything like that. It's simply about bringing the nuance, because feeling bliss for a couple of months is not the same thing as long-term integration. And that's just the reality. What she's describing, the sudden clarity, emotional euphoria, bliss, the sense of being washed clean, is something many people experience when they find a new spiritual framework that makes them feel safe after a period of instability. It's actually a known psychological phenomena called the relief high. The pendulum, right, swings from chaos to certainty to emotional euphoria. But that doesn't mean the deeper work has been done. This is important to say with love, but just because somebody says Jesus saved me doesn't automatically mean they've developed emotional stability or self-awareness or grounded discernment or personal accountability. There are plenty of people who follow Jesus devoutly and they still struggle with trauma, rage, repression, ego, shame, projection, and harmful behaviors. Faith doesn't erase the shadow. That's a part of who you are. We need it for this experience. Faith doesn't erase the ego within you. Faith does not replace integration, and that's why her story requires nuance. She talks about this bliss, right? But bliss can be disassociation. It can be a spiritual high that hasn't yet been tested by real life triggers, by real life relationships, responsibility, conflict, or stress, right? Because in life, right, this is just the beginning of this new chapter for her, which is beautiful. It sounds like this is exactly where she's meant to be, but this high hasn't been tested yet by the real world. It's still only a couple months in. It can be a coping mechanism that feels holy, but still bypasses unresolved pain. And again, yes, for some people, genuine transformation can happen. I'm not denying that. But the idea that Jesus removes all of your inner darkness in a single moment or over 7 days and you never struggle again is where the bypassing lives. Because as I said, you're still human. You still have a nervous system. You still have trauma stored in your body. You still have past experiences that affect you in the present moment. You still have patterns shaped by your upbringing, your conditioning, and your relationships, and you still have parts of yourself that need to be integrated, not cast out. So when she says she's in this state of bliss ever since her deliverance, that may be true for now, and maybe that's exactly what she needs for now, but we don't know what happens when life actually challenges her again. We don't know what happens when those wounds that are still present rise to the surface again. We don't know what happens when she's confronted with grief, intimacy, responsibility, or emotional discomfort. All the places where the real work happens, because this is another thing, integration and healing really happens through real life experience. A lot of people in New Age, they isolate, they spend more of their time channeling and talking to angels and this other world as opposed to in their everyday life. How do you know if the work you're doing is actually making a difference? Because the true healing and integration happens through real life human experiences. And that can't happen if you're disassociating in these other realms all the time. Bliss is not proof of healing. Consistency is proof of healing. Accountability is proof of healing. Emotional regulation and grounded self-awareness is proof of healing. Spiritual highs, whether that be in this Christian Jesus framework or in New Age spirituality, feel amazing. I've been there, I get it. But the high is not healing. The high is just simply the beginning. What matters is what comes after. Okay, so the next thing that I want to talk about is spiritual ego. I'm just going to show a little clip here.
It's because I had my angels come to me and they would say to me, your sole purpose on earth is to feel pain for the collective, and that's how you're going to heal the planet. Because at this point I had, like I said, from 19 years old, I wanted to help people. I wanted to help people. I had so much compassion for people, especially when I started to feel my emotions. It's like my compassion thermometer exploded. I felt for everyone. Your role, your sole purpose is to feel for the world. And when you feel these emotions, you're healing the planet. So the thing with these spirits and these angels is they give you this pride and this vanity and this like puff of like, you're important, you're special. And now I know it's because they're going to corner you and then try and take you down. But they essentially started telling me this. So I finally felt like, oh my God, okay, this is like a purpose of mine. This crying and this pain, there's a reason for it now. It's not like, why am I bursting out constantly in these emotional fits? Like, there's a reason. This is divine. This is pure. So I'm going through these crying sprees. Like when I say like 4 to 5 hours every day, I am crying.
So crying for 4 to 5 hours every day, again, not normal. And, she talks about these angels and these outside sources making your ego feel big. No, that was your ego feeling big as a result of your inner world. It's not that spirituality makes you feel that way. You feel that way if your ego is in the driver's seat. Like I said, on my spiritual path, I remember there was a point where my ego was starting to make me feel special and I was starting to feel superior and I clocked it. I remember thinking. I didn't shame myself for it, but I thought, I'm like, I know logically that we're all equal, but I'm feeling superior. That is not right. Help me. I prayed to God. I said, help me with my ego, because what I'm feeling does not match how I should be feeling. You know what I'm saying? And as I said, I was humbled really quickly. My ego felt special, felt superior, because there was a part of me, a wounded part of me, that felt unworthy.
And it became a routine. I would wake up, I would do my psychic readings for my clients, and I would sit down and I would cry. And I didn't tell anyone because I thought, this is what I'm here to do on the planet. So at this time, I start researching like souls, and I'm like researching star seeds and crystal souls and all of this. And
so, she's a sensitive person and I'm a sensitive person. Energies are real. There's a lot of pain going on in the world right now. So it's easy to feel into pain of others and all of that. But, her spirit guide's telling her your sole purpose is to feel pain for the world, to heal the collective. There's nuance. This is a whole other conversation I could have. There's so many things that she brings up here that I feel like I could dive really, really deep into. She talks about crystal souls, for example, and a lot of people in New Age get attached to these labels and it makes them feel better about themselves. But again, this is the ego at play here. The ego taking something and misinterpreting it, making it something that it's not, attaching onto these outside things. I feel like, sure, you might resonate with being a crystal soul. I'm not saying crystal souls don't exist. I'm not saying they're not real, but the problem is when you attach onto these things and you feel superior as a result of these things. We're all here for a reason. Some souls maybe are souls that came down here to bring the polarity. Maybe their soul here with their soul mission is to bring the polarity. That doesn't make you any better than them or then them any better than you, right? We're all here for different reasons. And I feel like sometimes people in the New Age or on the spiritual path, people who feel like they're here to heal the collective, they become the martyrs. I'm here to martyr myself, which is almost giving like the savior complex, like other people need me, I need to martyr myself to save everybody else, which again is ego. It's not that New Age itself. It's the ego that's brought into these paths where you can take the message and skew it, misinterpret it through the lens of your ego. And if you're already wounded, the ego is going to misinterpret the language, period. For her, this felt empowering. It made her feel chosen, important, spiritually significant. A lot of people have those experiences too when they start to awaken. This is not only her. But what's important to see here is that she believed it was the spirits inflating her ego, when in reality, this was her own ego using spiritual language to feel special, necessary, and safe. That's the difference. A person can be dabbling in New Age, and if they are more grounded and more aware of their shadow, they're not going to feel inflated by this because their ego won't hear the message in that way. This is common in New Age spaces. People grab onto identities, right? Souls, star seeds, crystal souls, light worker, not because the concepts themselves are wrong, right? I'm not saying I don't believe in those things or anything like that, but the ego does crave something to attach to, something that makes life make sense, something that makes them make sense, something that makes them feel important and good about themselves because they lack that from within themselves already. And again, maybe these things do exist. Maybe there are crystal souls and star seeds. I'm not dismissing that possibility. Like I said, I resonate with that to a certain degree myself. However, what matters is that you don't build your identity around these labels, because the moment you do, you stop living as a human being and start performing as a character. You then disconnect from your own inner authority and your own grounded humanity. And what often happens next, which is exactly what happened to her, is people fall into these cycles of self-sacrifice and emotional overwhelm. She was crying 4 to 5 hours a day. That is not normal, you guys. She believed she was carrying the pain of the planet. She didn't tell anyone. Again, isolation, okay? She isolated herself further because she believed this suffering was her purpose. It's giving savior complex, which again is ego. And the only reason why we act out in these ways is because there's a wounded part of us. It makes us feel important to do these things. I'm special. Therefore, we end up hurting ourselves, this pattern of hurting ourselves. But if you knew your worth, right? If you already felt important without this, needing this external source to validate you, you would not be falling into those cycles. We are not here to be martyrs for the collective. We are not here to drown in pain to raise the frequencies. We are not here to abandon our humanity for a spiritual identity. We are here for many reasons, okay? We're here for love. We're here for connection. We're here for joy. We're here to learn. We're here to grow. We're here to express our creativity. And none of those require attaching yourself to a spiritual label or believing you were chosen for a burdened mission. Maybe a part of your mission is to help heal the planet, but that doesn't need to look so drastic, right? I feel like I'm here to help heal the collective. And for me, what does that look like? it looks like ending the cycle within my family. I see the pain that my parents endured and their parents endured. And as a result of that, and as a result of the disconnection from within themselves, this pain is passed down, right? Generational trauma. And I'm here to heal that from within myself so that I don't pass it on to my future kids. That's helping the collective. It doesn't mean I need to martyr myself or sacrifice myself time and time again. And sure, maybe a part of my purpose is to stop the generational patterns. With that said, I'm here for so many more reasons. And that doesn't make me better than anybody else, because there's a lot of people here for that same reason. And there's a lot of people here for different reasons that are just as important as my reason. And my future kids are going to be here for their own reasons, right? Whenever somebody feels chosen in a way that isolates them or inflates their ego, it's not spiritual truth, it's ego. On the spiritual journey, if you ever feel superior or better than, ask for help, ask for guidance. This is another thing. I pray, and I say, help me stay rooted and grounded in the heart space. Help me stay grounded and centered in love. Help me be so deeply grounded into this earth that I may be of service to you. It's a part of my prayers. And I'm not perfect. I'm not saying I'm perfect. Okay. I want to make that very clear. God does want us to feel special because we are his children. Of course he wants us to feel special, right? So when you feel that way in New Age, you're feeling special. There's nothing wrong with that, because of course we are special, but it's knowing that we are all special and we are all unique, right? Feeling good and feeling chosen should not make you feel better than, because we are all chosen.
Like when people would say to me like Jesus is the way, I would block them. Like you could comment so much hate on my videos and I wouldn't block you. If you commented something about Jesus Christ, I would block you. I was so triggered by anyone who would message me things. I'd be like, oh my God, they're delusional. I thought Christians were really dumb. I thought that it was just a very low state of consciousness and they hadn't ascended their consciousness to such a high state to understand my view of the world. So
again, this is just another example of spiritual ego coming into play. And I see this with Christians as well. Sometimes the way it shows up with Christianity is, I'll pray for you. I'll pray for you. You need my prayers. It's this holier than thou attitude, right? I see it in New Age. I see it within Christianity as well, right? This view of my way is the right way. It's lower consciousness if you don't see it the way I see it, right? Again, it's this black and white thinking. There's no room for nuance here. I see ego, darkness again within both. She even mentions here she thought she knew everything.
Because I thought I knew everything, because I had an array of knowledge on anything New Age. Like I was the most genius person you could come across when it came to knowing of anything. People would ask me questions or anything.
So again, there's a difference between knowledge and integration. You can have all the knowledge in the world, but what is that knowledge if you don't actually know how to integrate that knowledge in your everyday life, right?
And all I heard Jesus say was, get rid of your crystals. And I was like, no, we're not doing this. Immediately I regretted asking Jesus for help. I was like, no, we're not doing this. I'm not turning Christian. I'm not going down this path. I refuse to believe this is the truth. I refuse it. I refuse it. And Jesus just replied like so lovingly, just said, but look at where you are.
And this is the thing, like, it doesn't have to be black and white. Like I said, I have my rosary on my altar next to my tarot cards, next to my crystals. I have crystals, but I don't worship my crystals. I just kind of think they're cute. I'm like, you're cute, and I'm going to put some good energy into you, and you're going to radiate good energy in my home. I don't pray to them. Maybe Jesus did guide her to get rid of her crystals and whatnot, but maybe because there was a lot of dark energy within them as a result of all of the darkness that she was experiencing in New Age, right? Maybe that was the best thing for her, because maybe she was worshiping these things. She was giving her power away to these things. So she talks about how she got rid of the crystals and, all of these things. And maybe that's exactly what she needed to do. So I'm not condemning her for that, right? But you don't have to do that. Just because it can be dark, right? If you're using it from that place, it doesn't mean it's dark for everybody. Okay, so there's something else. I'm just going to find the video here that she mentions that I want to really speak to.
At this time as well, I'm very into the dead. I would go into like a store and their past loved ones would come to me and tell me to speak to them, and I would deliver these messages and the people would be crying. And
that is so unethical, you guys. It is so unethical as a medium, as a psychic. If you are going up to people and delivering them messages, that is spiritual ego right there. I am a psychic medium. I've had proper training and development, 3 years of training. And I know she mentioned she did some sort of psychic medium development as well. I don't know what that looked like for her. And you need to be so careful with this world, because there's a lot of teacher trainers out there that are not actually grounded in themselves, okay? But I'm telling you right now, to go up to people to deliver them messages is so unethical. The only reason why you would be doing that is because your ego is guiding you to do that. Okay, I want to speak to how it is her ego in this scenario driving her. So when I say you should never go up to somebody in a public space to
deliver them a message. There's many reasons for that alone. It's very unethical. That being said, why do mediums do that sometimes? Why do they feel driven to do that? Their ego, because it makes their ego feel special. It makes them feel needed. It fills a void within them. They're probably not conscious that they're doing this, but they're seeking some sort of external validation. I will feel good about myself today if I go and deliver a message to someone and you see their emotional reaction, and that fills something within you because it makes you feel special. It makes you feel important. It makes you feel like you're doing God's work, right? And often this is subconscious. I'm not saying these people do this consciously, right? But it's often coming from a wounded part of them that doesn't feel worthy unless they are needed. They feel worthy when somebody needs them. I gave them the message. I delivered the message from spirit. I am important. And I see their emotional reaction. Therefore, it makes me feel good. That's vampire energy. You're preying on somebody's vulnerability, whether you're willing to admit that or not. It is so unethical. And it is not coming from a place of light from within. If you're meant to deliver a message to someone in person, it would more than likely happen in a much more organic way. For example, you happen to start up conversation with someone that has nothing to do with, Spirit told me to come up to you and deliver a message. You know, the Spirit will ensure that somehow a conversation starts and it is completely off topic, and then somehow it segues into you being a medium and the person is super open. And when that's the case, maybe you might feel the internal nudge to then tune in to see if there's a message. But it will often happen a lot more organically to just go up to someone to say God or Spirit has a message for you. Whether you're aware of it or not, the person doing that is doing so to feed their own ego, period. It's gross energy, whether or not their intentions are in the right place. Often good intentions are not enough if you are unaware of your shadow. Sorry, I'm getting hyped up about this. I have full body chills right now because it is a distorted energy. It's an ugly energy. It's not a nice energy, even if you have a good heart, even if you mean well. Because when you are unaware of your wounds, right? When you are unaware of your shadow, that is then when harm can be inflicted on others, whether it's obvious or not, right? And that's why a lot of people in coaching and spiritual world or whatever, it's really easy to prey on others, prey on other people's vulnerability, whether you realize that's what you're doing or not. Because if you also have a wound that you're unaware of, right? And you feel needed all of a sudden, because you don't know how to give that to yourself yet, because you're unaware of this wound that's within you. It's easy to prey subconsciously on other people to make you feel needed, to make you feel special. It inflates your ego. And I'm not saying this to shame her or anything like that. I believe she has good intentions. I believe her heart was in the right place. However, I see a lot of unconscious wounds that she was acting on. And that can be detrimental to other people. Okay, back to the video.
It is so unethical. And when you're walking around, she was talking about spirits delivering her messages, coming to deliver her messages all the time. If you are more in the other world than you are here in this world, you need to get grounded. Because as somebody who does this work myself, I turn it off and on. I tune into the spirit world on my terms. It is on my terms. They're not bombarding me. They're not overwhelming me, because it's on my terms, and I choose to tune into that world when I want to tune into that world. If I'm going about my day and, all these spirits are bombarding me, that's a sign that you need to ground in. You need to ground in, because if you're open all the time, right? You're open to it. You should not be open all the time.
If you're open all the time, if you're more in the other world than in this world all the time, and spirits are constantly bombarding you, that is a sign that you are in a perpetual state of disassociation. You would rather be in this other world, tuned out, disassociated from this body and this present moment right here, right now, right? Because if you're constantly in that other world, you're constantly disassociating. You're not actually here in your body in the present moment. It's a sign of disassociation. You got to get grounded. And as I said before, not just putting your feet on the bare ground, but living this human life, being here in this world in your body. So if you are in the other world more than you are in this world, it's a sign of disassociation, perpetual disassociation. And that's something that you really need to sit with and question. Why am I more in the other world than I am in this world? Because a developed medium A developed medium has the ability to tune in on their terms and to tune out, tune off on their terms.
Having angels walk me to this specific part of town, and they brought me to this bench where someone had died, and they told me to like put a blessing on this person's life and send it to the light. So like, I think I'm literally walking around doing God's work.
And this is another thing. You do not need to send spirits over to the light. This is something that a lot of people talk about, a lot of mediums talk about, oh, I helped this soul get into the light. Think about this logically, okay? We are spirit first, having a human experience. Humans don't need to help spirit go back and cross over to the other side. If you think about how silly that sounds, right? We are spirit first, right? Having a human experience. When we pass over, we are going back to love. We are going back home. Humans don't need to help them cross over. That's the silliest. That's so silly. Like it makes no sense. Energy is real. Energy is real. And spirits can leave behind energy, right? If something, let's say, traumatic happened, that will leave an energetic imprint. And if you're sensitive and open, you might be feeling into that real energetic imprint, but it doesn't mean there's a consciousness in it, right? And this is where discernment and development come into play. I believe that she's very gifted. I believe that she's very sensitive and very open. I'm not saying that she's not, but her abilities are underdeveloped, because to not have the ability to choose when to tune in and tune out, right? That's alarming right there, right? Development needs to happen to learn how to control your own energy in that way. Also being able to differentiate between whether you are actually in communion with spirit and communicating with an actual spirit with a consciousness or energy, right? Because when spirits cross over, what they'll leave behind sometimes is like an energetic imprint. Think of it like an echo, right? When you are out in a cave and you go, yodelay-hoo, yodelay-lody. Yes, I can yodel. But let's say you echo and you go, yodelay-hoo, and then all of a sudden you hear the echo in the distance, yodelay-hoo, yodelay-hoo, yodelay-hoo. It leaves an echo, right? And the echo is not the same as your voice in the here and the now. It might sound like it, right? You're hearing your voice come back to you, but it's an echo. It's not actually you in that moment, right? So yes, spirits can leave behind an echo per se, right? But it's not their actual soul. Their soul is over to love and light, right? And a medium with actual grounded development would know that, right? We don't, as humans, again, this is ego. To think you need to help a spirit cross over is wild. And there's so much of that distortion talked about in the spiritual community. There's a lot of people who are sensitive, who have abilities to tune in, but are very ungrounded and have not had proper development. And I get it. Thank God, my intuition, my guides guided me to proper development, because I too probably wouldn't know this if my path didn't lead me where it led me. But I'm telling you right now, as humans, we do not need to help a spirit cross over. That is your ego making you feel important, okay? It's not actually the truth, because we don't need that. And you need to be so careful out there. People you get readings, you know, whoever gives you readings and stuff like that, a lot of these readers don't actually have development and are very ungrounded, and it's dangerous to just get a reading by anybody, because it can cause more harm than good. And doing these readings is such a responsibility. It is not something to be taken lightly. And unfortunately, this space is very unregulated. This is something else I could go on and on and on about. This video is already long enough, so I'm not going to, but something that I think was important to touch on. Okay, and something else that she talks to is she talks about, you know, when she was in New Age, there was a lot of purges that she was doing. It's like she was being used as a vessel to purge the darkness, right? I've had an experience with this before where I was used as a vessel to purge, and I do believe that, you know, this earth, we are going through a change on the earth. You see all the darkness in the world, right? The darkness is coming to surface so that we can see it, so that as a collective we can integrate it, so that actual change can happen. It's a direct reflection of what's happening internally. Internally, there's a lot of darkness coming to surface for people so that we can integrate it, so that we can do better and move forward and heal, right, as a collective. And I've had experiences specifically on plant medicine where I've been used as a vessel. And for me, because I understand getting trapped in that, you know, sacrificing yourself. Again, that's ego. When, you know, you feel like, oh, the world needs me, I need to be used as a sacrifice. For me, what I've learned was energetic boundaries. And I had a really, really hard experience, and I'm not going to get into details, where I was used as a vessel. It was repe, actually. I did a repe ceremony. And I was told that I'm being used as a vessel to purge the darkness for everybody in the room. I'm the only one that reacted in the way I did. I was purging for literally like 8 hours. It was awful. Nobody else reacted the way I did. I was being used as a vessel to purge for everybody and also for the collective. And I believe that I was actually being used as a vessel to purge the darkness. I believe that to be true. However, that was one of the biggest lessons, because ever since then, I set firm boundaries. Anytime I go into any sort of ceremony, I clearly state I will not be used as a vessel. I do not need to be anyone's savior or whatever. Like, it was a huge lesson for me in energetic boundaries, and no, absolutely not. So, there are experiences where people have been used as vessels before to clear energy. And I don't, and this is not me saying those things aren't real or anything like that. Her depiction of it, she talks about it, how it was torturous and whatever. It's like, yeah, it can be really hard, right? It's not fun, but you also don't have to go through that. You don't have to go through that. You can tell them no. And in telling them no, it's also learning. It's like it was a lesson for me at the same time, right? It was a lesson for me at the same time. And I'm not going to dive too deep in that, because that's a whole other thing that I can really dive deep into. But it doesn't necessarily mean it was demonic forces at play. I needed a lesson, and I needed to learn the freaking hard way. Unfortunately.
And my roommate, who I moved in with, Lara, she said to me the first week I moved in, she's like, why don't you wear a cross around your neck? Like, why don't you just explore Christianity and see how that makes you feel? Because I've tried everything. And her saying that gave me the safety I'd been looking for years, because I felt I wasn't allowed to. I constantly had this feeling and this pressure that I had to live up to something. And Christianity was like the last resort. Like, I didn't want that to be the case. Like I said, again, I would always watch these Jesus videos and I would get triggered and I'd be like, I don't want anything to do with it. So she tells me this to get across. And that was a moment for me of more safety than I'd ever felt in my life, from someone I love, to be like, I accept you no matter who you are. Like, you can do whatever you like. Because before, I constantly felt like people always celebrated me for these psychic gifts and these spiritual gifts, and yet they were tormenting me. But because people loved it, I thought, well, maybe that's what I'm meant to do. And like, I just don't like it, but I have to do it anyway.
This is really important to note here. Again, it's looking at what other people expect of me. Who do I need to be to please everybody else outside of me? Who do I need to be to get that external validation? Again, this shows me that she has not found that connection, that established that deep trust and relationship within herself, right? Still seeking outside of her. And for her friend to say this to her, that's beautiful, right? It's beautiful that she felt a sense of safety with her friend telling it to her, but it's sad that she needed to hear it from somebody outside of her. So even now, moving into Christianity, again, it's like waiting for permission from an external source. This same pattern, waiting for something outside of you, right? It's beautiful that her friend loves her no matter what. I'm not trying to take away from that. And maybe she needed to hear that, and that's a good thing. But I'm noting that it's sad that it needed to come from an external source. Further proving what I'm saying, what I've been saying, it just feels like there's a disconnection from within. She doesn't trust her internal voice. She feels like she needs to perform, to be this certain person, to feel good about herself. Even now with this new Jesus framework.
I also start becoming friends with this guy called Don, who was extremely Christ-led, and he told me later that God told him to spend time with me.
Like, I would just be weary of people in general, New Age, Christianity, doesn't matter, whatever religion, if people are saying things like, God told me to spend time with you, because, she said, this guy Don said, God told me to spend time with you. It's like, these people are just outsourcing their power, whether it's within New Age, whether it's within Christianity. It's like, why don't you say, I feel called to spend time with you. I want to spend time with you. Like, maybe I don't necessarily know why, but I feel this internal pull that's guiding me toward you, instead of God told me, the Holy Spirit told me, my spirit guides told me, my angels told me, right? Again, outsourcing your power. And I'm seeing these patterns within Christianity, the framework of Christianity, and within the framework of New Age.
Jesus Christ has full authority over the spiritual kingdom. And that never left me.
I do want to talk a little bit about how Christians believe that Jesus has full authority over the spiritual kingdom. I want to break a few things down. So Jesus, to me, Jesus and Christ are two different things. Jesus, the person, the human, right, was a historical figure, a spiritual teacher, a human who walked through his own initiation path, right? Someone who awakened into full alignment and divine truth. Many believe that Jesus is a model of what humanity can become when reunited with the divine within. Christ now is more like a universal principle. This is not Jesus's last name. Christ means the anointed one, but mystically it refers to the universal divine essence, the spark of God within all beings, the state of unity with Source. This is why Jesus said things like, "The kingdom of God is within you. These things I do, you will do also in greater." He wasn't saying he was the only one who contained the divine. He was pointing people back to their inner source. And this just confirms what I was saying. The kingdom of God is within you. Yeah. The kingdom of God lies within you. Stop outsourcing your power. I honor Jesus. Thank you for coming down. Thank you for showing us the way. Thank you. Right? Because I believe that he came down to teach us, to show us the way, and to show us our potential. Christ consciousness now, I believe, is a state of awakening. Okay, so I talk about Jesus, I talk about Christ. I'm going to talk about Jesus. I'm going to get into a little bit more into my rant in a second. But going to Christ consciousness refers to expanded awareness, alignment, and divine truth, seeing through illusion and ego, living from compassion rather than fear. In mystical Christianity, it is a state of awakening Jesus came to demonstrate. This is why many mystics differentiate Jesus the person to Christ the universal consciousness he embodied. So Jesus came down as a human and embodied Christ consciousness, and I believe that he was showing us that we too have the ability to awaken Christ consciousness within us. Personally, I believe the second coming of Christ is not the literal second coming of Jesus the person, but Christ consciousness awakening within us as a collective. And I believe that's something that's happening now on earth. I believe people are awakening to Christ consciousness. That's a whole other ramble that I could get into. So when you awaken Christ consciousness, you're not becoming Jesus. You are awakening the Christ that he showed is possible. So Jesus Christ having full authority over the spiritual kingdom. In Christianity, Jesus is not viewed as a teacher who discovered spiritual truth. He is the truth. He is believed to be God himself in human form, which is why Christians believe he holds absolute authority over every spiritual force. Jesus is believed to be the incarnation of God, not just a prophet. In mainstream Christianity, Jesus isn't seen as simply enlightened or awakened. He is God in human form. Because of this identity, Christians believe he inherently outranks any angelic or demonic being. They believe that no spirit, no energy, no force can override him because he is the creator in their framework. This alone places him at the top of the spiritual hierarchy. The Bible states that all spiritual authority was given to him. Christians reference verses such as Matthew 28:18, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. To Christians, this means Jesus isn't just a spiritual guide. He is the governing power over everything invisible, energetic, or supernatural. Also, Jesus is viewed as the conqueror of death, of darkness, of evil, and the crucifixion and resurrection is interpreted as Jesus descending into the deepest darkness, overcoming it from the inside out, and returning with total dominion. So anything associated with dark spirits, oppression, or evil is believed to be already defeated by Jesus, therefore subject to him. This is why Christians believe rebuking in the name of Jesus holds authority, because he is seen as the one who has already overcome all darkness. Christians believe that Jesus mediates between humanity and the divine. Unlike other traditions where individuals cultivate their own power or awaken their own energy, Christianity places Jesus as the bridge, protector, guide, and authority figure. Christianity teaches that humans cannot save themselves, and only Jesus can guard, protect, and purify. So Christians rely on his authority, not their own, because they believe human discernment is too limited and vulnerable to error. This is why Christians reject practices like shadow work or integration, because from their lens, if it's dark, it's not you. It's something external trying to deceive you, and only Jesus has the authority to cast it out. Again, this is where the bypassing comes in, which I talked about earlier. I don't personally resonate with this. I think Jesus is great, but through the lens of Christianity, personally, it doesn't feel right for me. I see the distortion in that. And this belief isn't inherently harmful. It brings many people comfort. But where it becomes tricky is when somebody uses a belief in Jesus's total authority to bypass their own inner work. So just some framework for you guys, surrounding Christianity. Personally, I do see Jesus as a physical manifestation of God on earth, and I'll explain why. I believe he was human, right? But Jesus was conceived of the Virgin Mary, and I believe that he was conceived of the Virgin Mary. So who impregnated Mary? God, right? God did, because man didn't impregnate Mary. God impregnated Mary. And who is God? In my opinion, God is unconditional love. So Jesus was conceived through genuine and pure unconditional love. A lot of people here on earth, we're conceived not through pure and genuine unconditional love, right? Because a lot of us carry our trauma, right? Trauma is passed down. Jesus didn't carry that because his conception was of unconditional love. This is just my theory, my opinion, okay? You don't have to agree with it, but just something that I've been thinking about. And I have a lot of other theories when it comes to Christianity, even original sin. In religious contexts, we're viewed as sinful, shameful. We're born with original sin, right? Da, 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 da. And I think that original sin is simply another word for the ego. We are born with the ego. That's nothing to be ashamed of. But we need the ego, we need that darkness within us in order to provide that contrast here on earth. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to have this experience. To me, maybe that's what original sin is. Or maybe the original sin is the trauma that's passed down that imprints the soul through conception. Just some of my theories, right? I don't know. And Jesus dying for our sins, I think he died as a result of our sins, as a result of the ego, and then overcame it. Anyways, I have a lot of my own theories. I see truth in religion, but I think much of it has become distorted. I think Jesus is the ultimate example. He was conceived of unconditional love. Therefore, he was born that much more of the light because of his conception. And I do believe he was the physical manifestation of God on earth, essentially. Maybe you could call him half God, half human, because obviously Mary gave birth to him. But God was the Father, which is God, right? So the physical manifestation of God on earth. I think that God, Jesus, is such a beautiful example. And I think that we should follow in his footsteps. Anyways, I could go on and on and on. These are just my personal views and opinions now, right? But personally, all in all, I see distortion in New Age. I see distortion in Christianity. I see distortion in religion in general. With that said, I see truth in religion. I see truth in New Age. I see truth in it. So I don't necessarily believe one is dark, one is evil. It's the level of awareness one brings to that path. And you don't need to fall within a structure. For me personally, like I said, I keep my rosary next to my tarot cards. What really is important at the end of the day is discernment and listening and trusting your inner voice and your inner compass, because there is darkness on any path. And if you are unaware of the darkness within you, which I think a lot of people are, even people who mean well, even people with good intentions, even people with good hearts. And this is another thing. A lot of people don't realize how much darkness is within them because their heart is good, because they mean well, because they have good intentions. So because of that, people are not actually radically honest with themselves because they're unable to see the darkness within, because in their minds, I'm good. What do you mean? I'm not dark. I don't carry that darkness within me. It's unconscious. A lot of people are unaware. So again, I'm not shaming anybody, and we live in a world where we are so disconnected from the kingdom of God within, the voice within, our inner wisdom, whatever language you want to use. And I believe the soul is an extension of God and the ego is an extension of the devil, because the devil is not always dark and it's not always necessarily evil. The devil can be tricky. Going back to my example of when I convinced myself I was working out for my health, right? That's seemingly good, right? The devil came in a sneaky way. And there's so many examples that I could use there. It's tricky is my point. Darkness is not always scary and evil, and it's not always obvious. The devil could also look like, let's say, for example, you're with a group of your friends, right? And somebody makes a joke, but it wasn't really a joke, right? It wasn't really a joke. It hurt your feelings, and everybody's laughing. There might be a part of you that doesn't feel confident enough or safe enough to stand up for yourself. Or there might be a part of you that convinces yourself that, oh, it was just a joke. It wasn't serious. Just laugh it off. You're being too sensitive. That doesn't seem that dark, but that could be the devil within you telling you, convincing you that, oh, it's actually no big deal. They're your friends. They wouldn't actually hurt your feelings. Don't listen to your intuition. Don't listen to that inner voice. Just accept it. Just sweep it under the rug. It's no big deal. Really, though, in that act, you're abandoning yourself. That is the devil communicating with you, or your ego communicating with you, the mind communicating with you. You're not actually listening to your heart, your soul, the God within you. Because if you were, you wouldn't tolerate that behavior because you know your worth and you won't tolerate anything less than. Therefore, not that you would get mad and yell and react, but you would have enough courage to stand up for yourself. So the devil sometimes looks like self-sabotage, not being able to speak up for yourself, saying yes when you should say no. It's not always dark and scary.
Editing Brittany here. I have some exciting announcements in a minute, so hang tight. Hang tight with me. But I just wanted to wrap this up a little bit better. If you made it this long, thanks for bearing with me. This is my first time doing like a really big deep dive like this, so I'm still figuring it out. But what I wanted to say at the end of the day, I don't think Ella is a bad person. This video was not created to try to attack her as a person. However, her jumping from New Age to Jesus is a common phenomena. I see this a lot, and I feel like as a society we have this black and white way of thinking, and I really do think we need to move away from that as a collective. So I do think that these topics are important to converse about. I think that it's important to share our differing opinions, to dabble in the gray, because black and white thinking leads to more divisiveness, and we need the opposite of that here on Earth at this time especially. We need to come together in unity, and that can't happen if we maintain a black and white way of thinking. So I'm here to talk to the nuance, and also she has a very, very large following. Don't get me wrong, I believe that this is her path and she's exactly where she's meant to be. With that said, I feel like when you come forward with things like this, if you're not clearly stating, hey, you trust your intuition, trust yourself, listen to your heart, use your discernment. If you're not clearly stating that and you're coming across speaking with authority as if you know best, that can do damage. Like I said with my video, trust yourself. It's okay if you don't agree with everything that I said. Anyways, no hate to her or anything like that. Like I said, I feel like she's a genuine sweetheart, and I think she's right where she's supposed to be. She's on her journey, and this is her journey, and that's beautiful. With that said, trust yourself, walk your path. It doesn't have to be black and white. And I think we're moving into an era of calling our power back. Instead of just listening to influencers and following what they're doing and giving our power away, outsourcing our power to all of these different things, we are learning how to reconnect to ourselves. And we are all here on our own unique journey, and we are here on our own path. And what resonates for me might not resonate for you, and vice versa. And it is so important to honor yourself and your path while also not judging or criticizing others for walking the path that they're walking. So with that, stay tuned for my exciting announcements.
This was a long one. If you made it to the end, let me know in the comments. Respectful discourse in the comments, please, you guys, okay? These are my opinions. You don't have to agree with me, but I feel like it's not so black and white, and people have black and white thinking, and I think we need to start bringing in the gray matter. We need to start bringing in the nuance, because really there's a lot of nuance to these topics, and I'm here to talk about it. Yeah, so get ready for more videos like this from me. Hit that subscribe button if you made it to the end. Like, what are you doing? If you made it to the end and you didn't hit that subscribe button, baby, I have a lot of opinions. I have other videos like this as well, so check out my other stuff, and there's going to be more videos like this. I feel like this is where I'm going to be putting more of my time and energy into, as opposed to just readings all the time, because I'm feeling a shift with my YouTube channel as a whole. Also, you guys, if you made it to the end, I'm super excited to announce I will be starting a group mentorship January 14th. I'm super excited about this. It runs 21 weeks. It gives you access to my full 20-week program that I poured my heart and soul into. It's like a full-blown course, and you're going to see the teacher in me come out. There's 16 lessons, and you get a full video lecture with each lesson ranging from 20 to 50 minutes, along with integration practices, reflection questions, along with extra materials. There's guided meditations in there. There's extra video content in there. There's external links in there to really help you integrate the knowledge. Now, my mentorship is all about helping you connect with your inner voice, which fits really well with this video. You're going to leave feeling a lot more connected to your inner voice. You're going to leave feeling a lot more clear between the voice of your ego versus the voice of your intuition. You're going to learn how to understand the difference. Therefore, you're going to trust yourself more. Therefore, you will be able to take aligned action on where your heart is actually guiding you. You're going to feel a lot more self-resourced. It's going to help you gain clarity on your path ahead. It's for people who are ready to change their lives, because it is going to require self self-devotion. It is going to require you to actually put in the work and dedicate time to self, because the transformation is going to come as a result of the work that you put in. The mentorship and the program will provide structure. It will provide an outline. It provides everything that you need to embark on this journey, right? But the real change happens as a result of the work that you put in. It also is going to provide support and community. Sometimes this path can be lonely, okay? Community is important, as we talked about in this video. So if you're interested in meeting other people who are also on this journey, who want to build that connection with themselves, who want to learn how to build a genuine relationship with their spirit team, not fragmented parts of their ego, but actual real spirit communication, where you are connecting with those that are there to guide you on the other side. If you want to learn the difference between psychism, mediumship, channeling, to learn how to tune into your own gifts, it's going to help you get clear on your path. It's going to help you disconnect from ego-based desires and ego-based manifestation. We're going to talk about manifestation. There's 16 lessons, you guys. It goes deep. There's 5 modules. There's one about tapping into your intuition. There's a few lessons there. There's a module on the ego. There's 4 lessons within there. There's a module with learning the difference between the ego and intuition. There's another few lessons there. There's a whole module on manifestation. There's 3 full lessons on manifestation to help you align with your genuine desires, as opposed to manifesting from an egoic place, right? Because if you were genuinely in alignment with your path, you wouldn't be trying to manifest your dream life, because that is control. That is manifesting from an egoic place, trying to control the future. So we're going to learn about that so that you can align with your genuine soul desires, right? Because you are manifesting right here, right now. But manifestation is not something that you should try to do. That's, I get it. I could go on and on and on about that. Then I have a whole module on genuine spirit communication, grounded and rooted spirit communication. So this is saying yes to change. This will change your life if you put in the work. And the timing is perfect. We start January 14th. So if you're interested, I will have the links for that below. Definitely read the whole thing so that you get a good idea of the program. Also, you guys, if you can't afford the mentorship, or it's simply not for you, because you will feel a calling for it and it won't be for everybody. If it is for you, it's going to feel like a step out of your comfort zone. You're going to question, should I do it? Should I not? This is where you're going to have to, trust yourself, trust your voice, trust your intuition. But if it's not for you, I also have the full program available separately, so you can go through it on your own. I also have the separate modules available as separate courses. So if you don't want the full program and you just want one module, you also can purchase the modules as separate courses. I would recommend starting with the ego course. That might feel like, the one that's the least interesting, but that one will give you a foundational base for the rest of my courses. So that would be my recommendation if you just want to start with one piece of it. I highly recommend starting with the ego course, but of course that's up to you. But yeah, I'm excited for the mentorship, you guys. I'm so excited. And the idea is to help you connect with yourself, your inner voice, so that you can align with your heart-led path. If you feel like there's more out there for you, but you don't know what that is, you don't know how to get there, this course is for you. If you feel like you're in the in-between, but you don't necessarily know how to get to where you're being guided to go, this course is for you. This course is for you if you want to learn how to connect and trust yourself more, if you want to learn how to differentiate between the voice of your ego versus the voice of your soul. This mentorship is for you. So check out my Stand Store link in the description below, read up on it, read through the whole thing. And if you have questions, shoot me a message through my website. Head over to my website, scroll to the bottom, send me a message, but I'm going to leave it there. I'm sending you all so much love, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.